Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Board this evening. We've just got a few items before us before we get started into our regular meeting. If anyone's here for 61-16, which is the Hawthorne Park, 4, 6, and 8, Hawthorne Lane, that is going to be continued to January 9th, 2017. So sorry for any conveniences on that. And do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Minutes from December 6th. Are there any errors or omissions?
I'll move to approve.
All right.
Second.
Motion's now made and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. There are 7 A&Rs before you at this point. Do we need to isolate anything out?
No, I'm good.
No? Not hearing anything at this point.
Staff good?
Yeah, staff.
Yes,
is good.
staff has made their recommendations as well too.
Can we just move to approve all 7?
Yep.
So moved.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. So A&Rs that are going to be approved tonight: 8058 Kevin F. Dale, trustee, lot 25, Proprietors Road. 8059 heirs of Charles W. Britton. 8060 Doris Catherine Strang on 8 Trip Drive. 8061 Town of Nantucket, 61 Lovers Lane. 8062, which is Nisder Incorporated on 721 Washington Street. 8063 Miriam Varian on 4 Carawa, and 8065 Milton Kaufman on 32 Milk Street. Hearing no discussion at this point, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. You have one second dwelling before you at this point. Is there anything that...
I'll move to approve the second dwelling.
all right.
Friend Realty Trust.
Okay, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Previous plan is continued, which is 1242 Topland Properties. That brings us to...
There's another A&R that goes.
Yeah, I just noticed that.
It's part of the special permit.
It's part of the special
We
permit.
should
I
do
think
this
that's...
first, though?
No, we should hold that till you're...
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. We'll come back to that then. Okay. Welcome. So next thing before us at this point is 65-16, which is Delphine and Duncan F. Winter on 26 Monahans Road. Anyone for the applicant, by chance? Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Staff reviewed the application and will recommend endorsement
Okay.
for approval.
All right. So anyone on the board have any comment on this?
I'll move to approve it.
Well,
Yeah,
let me
it's a public
just
hearing.
do the public hearing real
Public hearing.
quickly.
Oh, it's a
that's all.
public hearing?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
That, don't worry about it. You're fine and well. So if there's anyone who'd like to comment on this application, I ask you to please raise your hand, step forward. Not seeing anyone at this point.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And
Motion to approve.
okay.
I'll second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Next thing before us is 66-16 Orange Street Residential, 137 and 141 Orange Street. For the applicant. Oh, I told them we're not doing Hawthorne. Well, let's... Hi. Good evening. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm DJ McKinnon from Atlantic Development here on the Orange Street application. And along with me tonight, I also have Josh Swirling from Bowler Engineering, and Arthur Reed is here as well. I'm just going to make a couple of opening comments and then turn it right over to Josh. But what I wanted to start with is we were here at the, I believe it was the October meeting for kind of a very preliminary discussion about our proposal. And from there, took those comments into account with the updated plans that you're going to see. Kind of the bigger picture comments were taking the single kind of larger structure that we had, try to break it up into two separate structures that could be smaller in size. So we've done that. Josh is also going to talk about some of the access that was discussed at the meeting. We did try to take a look at a couple of access alternatives, ran into some challenges with grading, which he'll be able to explain that and explain how we came out where we are. And then separately, just to keep you up to speed, we are in front of the HDC with a demo application. We've met with them a couple of times. Hopefully, we are going to be back in front of them tomorrow. I think we've addressed their comments. Hopefully, they'll be able to act on the demo application tomorrow. Then we'll be following up with the architectural pieces of that. And then separately, just to let you know, we had some public comments that were submitted to the planning board by the Commons, which is our abutter looking at the plan to the left. We did meet with Stephen Cohen and Paul Wolf today to kind of walk through some of their questions and concerns. I believe we were able to answer a lot of those, and I think we'll have addressed those. We also spoke with Laura McCluskey, who had some concerns related to the plan as well. I don't think she submitted them formally to the board, but we did have a discussion. She may be here tonight. Okay, she's here tonight as well. Thank you. And the bigger item on that was just trying to clarify the parking on the plan, which Josh is going to do. So that's kind of the quick update, and I'm going to turn it right over to Josh and let him get right into the plans. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Josh Swirling, professional engineer with Bowler Engineering. I prepared the site plans that are before you. And it may be easier, there should have been a link to or a graphic in there called site plan rendering. That might be a little easier to follow through, and then I can point. There we go. So the parcel that we're contemplating developing here is a combination of two lots, 137 and 141 Orange Street, which contains approximately 6/10 of an acre, just over 6/10 of an acre. And we're proposing two buildings here and here. The zoning requires that we have 1 unit per 1,500 square feet. So while this is two buildings, we're proposing a lot line that separates right here. So we'll have on each of those lots that equates to about 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. Each of those lots will contain 4 units. So the building is bifurcated by a property line in each of these instances, and then there's a lot line that runs up the middle as well. So 4 lots, roughly 6,000 to 7,000 square feet each, and then the middle line that's shown on the building here is actually just the interior demising wall between the units. So you can see on this a little more clearly, and it was difficult to see on the two-dimensional black and white plans, that we are proposing. Oh, that's great. We are proposing to have a driveway off of Orange Street, and once you get down to this level, you're going to be able to drive underneath the buildings. And right now we're showing, and I think this is a point of question, both by Ed Pesci and maybe some folks on the board and staff as well. We are proposing currently 14 spaces beneath each of the two buildings, as well as 6 spaces out back here at grade. The grading is such that we're up around elevation 14 on the street here. You'll actually dip down to elevation 12 to get into either of the buildings, and then the building finished floor here will sit up at about elevation 20. All of our utilities will be proposed out on Orange Street. We have water, sewer, electric, telephone. The comment that DJ made earlier relative to potential connection here, it is grade challenged since we're coming down from 14 to 12. Dave Street up here is at elevation 18 to 19, so just be a little difficult to propose a connection there where we're trying to get parking underneath the buildings. And I know there was a graphic included here. Before I get to that, I'll mention that we have a 7-foot wide. We're continuing the 7-foot wide sidewalk along Orange Street, wrapping it out back on Dave Street. We have been able to save a pretty significant tree that's located here. We'll have some nice porches along the front of the building, the face of the building, and you can see that the buildings are set back from the sidewalk a bit. That light green area is anticipated to be a nice hedgerow. And if the building sketch, the elevation sketch is in there. either a separate attachment or way at the end, I think. There we go. Yeah. Sure. So as DJ mentioned, this is kind of just a quick two-dimensional image that was prepared by the architect. He'll be in front of HDC working through final details, but what I wanted to point out, if you folks had looked at this, it appears, as though it's right up on the building, but right up on the street. As I had mentioned, it's going to be set back several feet. There'll be a hedgerow that runs along this area on each of the buildings, and then a porch will be just on the first floor, and then you're going to have a roof that pitches back towards the rest of the building, which you can kind of make out that effect as you look at it here and here. So I think it's going to present really nicely to the street. And, well, again, that hedgerow, the porch, it's really going to help soften that facade. And when we come back before you, we'll probably have some three-dimensional images that better represent how the streetscape works with this plan. We did receive the comments from Ed Pesci. The gist of those comments were pretty straightforward. He understood what we're anticipating doing for a drainage design. We are scheduled to do test pits on Wednesday. Mr. Pesci will be in attendance to observe those with us on your behalf as well. We have pretty significant landscape improvements for the amount of lot area that we have here, almost 200 plantings proposed, some red cedars, that nice hedgerow that we had discussed, and planting throughout. And we will also be preparing a traffic study, which we anticipate having for you folks in advance of your January meeting. And as Mr. Pesci had suggested, we'll also reach out to fire personnel to make sure that they're comfortable with what we're doing from access and safety in that regard. But first, wanted to hear any comments that you folks might have.
Okay. Board members? Anything you have? Go ahead. I'll let you. I get to you.
The parking under the building, is there going to be handicap parking there?
Yes, there will be ADA spaces, certainly.
Okay. And
We anticipate having an elevator
Okay.
to get those folks in.
is the parking going to be assigned, or is it, for each unit? Because that,
Sure, I can comment. Couple of things about the parking. Yeah, we would expect that it would be assigned to the units, and then we do have the six. What would actually like to do is right now we're showing 14 spaces under each building. We're also kind of working through some of the details in the architectural side with kind of column spacing and things like that. There is a possibility with some waivers that we think we might be able to get 16 spaces under each building, as well as, we would have the appropriate handicap parking there as well. We're advancing those plans. We'd like to come back and get a little bit more specific with those. I know typically spaces are 9 feet by 20 feet. And there's provisions for waivers for the possibility to go down as low as 7 feet by 17 feet. We don't think we'd have to go down that far with some, but we may have kind of a mixture where we would have some smaller spaces. But the idea would be to try to have, at least the 14 we show, hopefully get up to 16 under each building, and that way we'd have 2 spaces for each unit within the same building.
so the handicap spaces would be
Yeah,
non-assigned? They'd be. If
guess
there's a couple of handicap spaces
yeah,
under the building.
I guess probably my. I think we
and
could.
say
Yeah.
they're under Unit A, but Unit B needs the handicap space.
Yeah. I don't know the answer right now, but let me find out how we're supposed to manage that. Matt McEachran is working on the architectural and the code compliance. Matt, he couldn't be here tonight, but let's see if we can find out an answer to that.
Okay. And I was wondering if we could extend the sidewalk on Dave to your lot line.
Can we go back to that? I'll let Josh comment.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think
Let's
we
find
did.
out.
I didn't.
No, it's a good point.
Yeah. You go all the way to the aerial. Yeah. No.
Maybe I missed that.
The one with the plan, actually, yeah.
Yeah, you're
right?
right. You're
So we can look at that. I think you're seeing it go up Dave Street almost to the property line. There might be some tricky grading in there where we thought that it might be appropriate to leave that future connection for when there's hopefully an opportunity to extend it beyond our lot line.
Okay, I mean, you know, I'd like to see it go to the lot line, but if there's a mitigating reason, I'm not gonna.
There's a pretty steep jump in grades
Okay,
once you get up to that corner.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that you can't do an in on Orange and an out on Dave? I know we had batted that around a little bit because of the grade changes are too severe.
Yeah, basically out of Dave, you're at elevation 18.
Yeah.
The entrance coming in of Orange, you're at elevation 14. So from there, we can go down the 2 feet and get under the building. The first floor of the building is at elevation 20. So it ties in well with Dave Street. The problem is if we try to come in with that access, we'd literally eliminate a significant section of the building.
How wide is your driveway cut?
I'll let Josh.
It looks humongous.
I believe it's 20 feet for two-way travel there. Yep, it's 20 feet, and then it tapers down to 16 when you get to the rear of the building.
Okay. Is the 20-foot elevation for the first floor the absolute minimum required for a floodplain, or are you lifting it to get the parking underneath it 2 or 3 feet higher than you have to be?
Yeah, it's set based on both the elevation of Dave Street and the elevation of Orange Street, and our ability to get down below the building for the parking and still have the whole first floor elevation make sense with its surrounding.
Because that's the one thing that's concern to me is how high out of the ground this thing's going. What's the overall height?
Do you have the peak?
Less than 40, that's the one.
Right. It'll be less than 40.
But more than 30.
Yes.
Yeah. Just trying to nail that down for a second. I know you're in the overlay district. Is there any way to drop the whole building further and go into the ground further? Or are you trying to drive level right into the parking without going down a ramp?
No, we're driving down a couple of feet,
Okay.
and would prefer not to have that be, something where you're bottoming your car out coming down too steep off of Orange Street.
And just to go back to something that Joe just asked, my parents have handicap parking in New Jersey in a similar situation. Front of it looks like it's just slightly elevated at a grade, but you go down and drive under and you sign up for a handicap space if you need it. It doesn't go with a unit. If you need it, you have one and you sign up for it. Normally those units are the closest to the elevator that you have, but they're not assigned to any particular unit unless under the state code, under the AAB, you have to provide a handicap unit. If you have so many units, isn't there some requirement at the state level that you have to provide a handicap unit?
Yeah. Yes, I know we'll have that. And the elevator going from the garage level will actually stop at the first floor as well as the second floor. So
You
we
can
should
get
be
away
able
with
to
a lift
accommodate.
at that point, probably, a Lula.
Yeah.
But just make sure that you sort of work that part out.
Okay.
But generally speaking, unless you have a handicap unit, which I think you're required to because you have so many units,
Yep.
then you would have one attached to it. But otherwise, people sign up for them. You
Okay.
provide them, but they sign up for them. I know it's probably going to come up. We don't like to isolate parking areas. I know Barry's going to bring it up anyway, but we don't like to isolate parking areas. Was there any discussion with the Commons like it was when we did the bank on the other side to roll through into the Commons? So people don't even have to come back to Orange Street if they want to go towards the Stop and Shop.
Yeah, so I was going to bring up one of the comments that we had, because we did meet with, from a couple of representatives from the Commons today. They've actually asked us to incorporate a fence along the back of our parking area so that people will actually not walk through there. Their concern is that people living on our location would try to use the parking at the Commons as opposed to our parking on site. So they've actually asked to see if we can incorporate a fence to prevent the access.
That's not something that the planning board is probably going to be terribly enthusiastic about. Because if people are on foot and they want to walk to the Stop and Shop, we're going to make them walk all the way out, all the way down, all the way up Dave Street, which half of it doesn't have a sidewalk, as opposed to just being able to walk through a gate and just, walk to Sophie's. There's no we don't do that anymore at the planning board. We got into trouble with all that stuff for years. But if you think about it, the Pacific Bank is attached to the post office. Dan's Pharmacy is attached to the Nantucket or the Cape Cod 5. We made some errors elsewhere in Mid-Island where we didn't connect the parking areas, and we're not making that mistake again. So I understand we have private property, but I think this is something that's going to have to be more fully discussed, if not an actual vehicular connection, then a walking path with a gate or something, so they can go through there and they can walk on over the post office, the bank, the Stop and Shop, without having to do this.
Yep.
That's ridiculous, and it's not something that we're personally going to promote. I understand there's some constraints there, but I think that has to be a larger discussion. I think it has to be pushed.
Okay.
What do we do for Cumberland's? Oh, yeah, Cumberland's attached to the gas station and the auto body. And where else? Everybody else over there in the Sanford area, they're all attached to each other with multiple entrances. And I don't think we've done anything isolated for some time now. We try not to. I mean, if we had known about the tile store and that little complex there where Meadowar Electronics used to be, Radio Shack, we would have cut that through had they come in a little bit closer together. But they were very far separated from development. But I don't think we're doing that anymore, frankly.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think that's something that needs to be looked into. Otherwise, I don't have any problem with the concept at all.
Okay.
So long as the underground is camouflaged. We don't want any buildings on stilts like down in the Keys
Yeah,
or something.
no, we're not looking at it.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Has there been any design for the lighting?
Actually, I'll let Josh.
Parking or low lighting to affect
Yeah.
neighbors?
We haven't detailed that yet, but that's certainly something that Ed Pesci had asked for as well. In terms of what's going to be along the street, it'll certainly be streetscape, pedestrian-friendly, kind of in theme with what else you see in the downtown area. Out back, we could continue that theme, or it could get, to be more LED purposeful lighting for the parking area. So we can do it either way out back.
They have to meet the dark skies no matter
Yeah.
what
No, if you have a specific, design you'd like to see, we're happy to incorporate it. I don't know who should we follow up. Is that something we should check with Leslie?
Leslie's the lighting officer.
I
so
thought-
I think she's still. Oh, not
I
anymore.
know she used to be.
Tag, you're it.
Tag, I'm not it. So
Sorry about that.
the zoning enforcement officer,
Thank you.
Marcus Silverstein, is actually the zoning enforcement officer.
Thank you. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Okay, we'll follow up and see what they'd like to see.
Thank you.
You all done, John?
Yes.
Good. Go.
DJ, just the only thing I have is I agree with the connector thing, not necessarily vehicle. You probably have a huge opposition to that, but walking through the back is definitely something should be able to happen somehow.
Okay.
In some easement or some kind of agreement. The only thing I have is where the sidewalk meets Dave at Orange. Is that going to be sort of depressed there a little bit, slopey down, so that vehicles ride over, or any large vehicle that turns up Dave Street? Just, I know you're going to have a crosswalk and you're going to make it so that it's handicap anyway, but I'm just saying, is that going to be set up? Is it going to be all brick? I know that this is just a picture right now, but you plan on making that so that it's, easy surface to turn, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But not run over somebody in the handicap
Yep.
120 that's trying to cross the street.
And we're getting the sidewalk, I know we talked about this at the last meeting, I just don't remember exactly every word said, but we're going to get a full, what was it, 8 feet?
Well,
What are
what
we
we
gonna
wanted
get
to do in front of the Compass Rose Real Estate, we went out and measured it,
Yes.
and they've done a nice cross-section. It's actually 7 feet wide, so we thought it made sense to
Match
continue
that.
that same 7-foot width all along Orange
Yep.
Street. Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Anybody else?
Fire pit.
Fire pit.
Wait, whoa, back the truck up.
Uh-oh.
Oh, is that what that is?
No, no, no.
That's what it's.
What is that? I can't read it. It won't download here. Is that, what is that wonky thing up there in the round thing?
Proposed
You know,
fire
at this, we thought
Let's
it
not
would.
have that.
Okay. We
No
were trying to
fountains.
create some feature there.
No.
Okay.
You can have some benches, no fire pit, no fountain, none of that foo-foo stuff in there.
Okay.
It's totally out of place. I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was a fountain for a second. I said, that's not happening.
Jacuzzi.
There you go.
You can have little benches or something, some sort of a respite location there. That's
Okay.
fine. It's not the fire pit place.
Okay.
I hate fire
No,
pits.
you don't want
Anyways.
that. You don't want that anyway.
I don't like fire pits.
Anyone
I don't
else on the
like HCC
board?
Either.
Anyone else on the board have anything that they want to offer?
Just you.
So, do you have something?
Can you comment?
Yeah. You can comment.
It's a special
I guess just two things. One is, given the changes in grade, the front of that grade, at the front in Orange Street, to the rear, it jumps up about 6 feet. And you mentioned that there will be a dip of at least a couple of feet into the parking area. I'd just like to ask that we get a cross-section left to right of the site and front to back. I think that might be helpful for us just to review it, because there's going to be a considerable dip there. And if that could include the finished side of the parking area, garage ceiling, and finished first floor height, and the elevation mark for the street level and all the hard surfaces.
Sure.
And then the only other comment was that personally, to me, without that, there seems to be a difference between the plan concept shown on this slide that's in front of us and the architectural elevation in terms of jogs in the building. And I'd like to have that reconciled if that is the case. It does appear to be the case. The point being is that I think it's important to know where the front of that building is going to sit relative to the sidewalk, because if you're putting privet in there, that's both a physical and a visual barrier.
Yep.
And what it will do is create a wall right out on the sidewalk. So I just kind of like to know
Yep.
more accurately what,
Yeah.
if that's appropriate, what the floor plan will look like.
Okay. Yeah, and to just comment on that, the elevation was kind of the first draft of elevations. Matt is working on more. We're expecting to submit to HDC, and not looking to close this hearing tonight by any means, so that we expect to get some feedback from HDC. Some of those walls, some of those jogs, may start to move and develop as we, go back and forth. So we'll try to keep you as updated as we can as to where we stand with them, and try to get the plans to match each other as we move forward. But we think we're generally going to be working, I guess I'll call it, within the envelope that you see there today.
What are the dimensions across of each building?
Josh may have them right here.
Because I think they look larger than they really are.
About 88 by about 70, which includes the porch.
Yeah.
So across, at the longest point, it's approximately 88 feet
Of each building?
in width.
Of
And
each
then,
building?
Yep, and then about 70 feet. The 70 feet includes some of the jogs and includes some of the porch and so forth, but that would be the longest dimension on any of those footprints.
Do you know how that relates to the building across the street? So people can get an idea. The
Of? Our island home across the street,
Not, well, Landmark House, yeah.
Yeah.
Landmark House.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I know those were well over, I think it was roughly 130, 140 feet or something like that.
Just
It
trying to
was,
give people an
Yep.
idea of what
Yep.
concept we're talking about.
Okay. Anyone else? So, Carl, go ahead.
Is there a protocol for drainage underneath the buildings in the parking areas if they're lower than the streetscape for storm events?
Yeah, so we're oversizing. What we've done with the area that dips down is try to limit the amount of area that contributes to that, so that most of it is garage, and then the small portion that's open to the elements between the two buildings, we have a system that's going to be oversized to handle runoff from that area. Yep.
Anything else? All right, so gentlemen, a few things. Just from my perspective, I think I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Markinger said about trying to extend that sidewalk up a bit further.
Okay.
Let's get it done.
okay.
It's going to happen eventually anyways. Unless you have some other type of mitigation plan or some other thoughts about what you're going to do in there, I'd certainly like to hear it. But I am not sure what that's supposed to be. But you do have foot traffic that goes into that area. And all of a sudden you're being forced into the street at certain times. So I honestly do think you need to take another serious look at that. Otherwise, I'd like to hear what other proposals you have for us, just to leave it in its kind of current state. I am duly concerned that everything is coming in and out of Orange Street, given the size of the parcel right now, how many bedrooms you have. Orange Street is at best okay. At worst, it's a nightmare, especially during the summer. And I'm having a real problem trying to figure out how you're going to make that traffic integrate and flow, both with right and left-hand turns happening into that traffic stream. Yeah. So, I mean, your last iteration of the plan where you were shunting traffic in a one-way, shunting it back out onto Dave Street, I thought was a good plan. It made perfect sense to me. I thought it worked well and would have been somewhat harmonious to the neighborhood. I don't see it here. And so I think I'm curious to see what your traffic review is going to bring us at this point. I know I want to hear from Andrew and Leslie to see if they have some mitigation plans that may need to happen on Orange Street, if this is the only thing that's going to happen there.
Okay.
In terms of your fire pit and stuff, I'm going to disagree with my colleague here. Sometimes adding some nice things isn't such a bad deal. Whatever it may be. And that's something that I think you're going to have to focus on more with the HDC than with us in terms of what that's going to be. I can also see, too, you're probably just looking at this real quickly, and I know it's just sketch over at this point, but you may have to move the crosswalk that's up there as well, too, because in its current configuration, it looks like it's running right smack into your driveway. So that's something you guys may need to, or your traffic engineer may need to reconsider.
Yeah. Yep.
When you do that. Is there any thought about, and Andrew and Leslie, I need to kind of tune you in here at this point, the bike path on the other side of Orange Street, is there anything that we need to be looking at with this applicant along those lines? I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of do that. And so I want to just throw that into your cap and see if you have any thoughts on that.
We'll have to look at it. I mean, the main adjustments really happen on the other side of the street. But I think reconstructing the sidewalk is a benefit there, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were going to look at some bike parking underneath each of the buildings, which would seem to be the preferable place to put the bikes.
Yeah, I mean, and truthfully, I haven't made up my mind yet, but Linda was 100% correct. Just about every project that we start looking at nowadays, we're always looking at the interconnectedness of things. To be putting up a fence and not being able to traverse back and forth, that's a crying shame. Because that really does solve your problems right there. And if the issue is we're worried about people parking in the commons area, up in through there, I think you got to worry about the reverse aspect of it as well too.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other things that you could do to make that maybe a little bit more workable, even if it's just making it a one-way and gating it. I don't know if there's an answer to it, but I would love to see that interconnected as happen because it resolves your issue with Dave Street in one fell swoop.
Yep.
At a minimum, Linda's right as well too. You know, we always look to try to see if we can also do a pedestrian easement through there as well too. Again, this is an incredibly walkable neighborhood. You know, you have a market there, you have a restaurant there. Stop and Shop is just a stone's throw away. So I think you could be doing yourself a favor for this, you know, on both sides of the equation. So I wouldn't discourage you from just basically barring that door shut yet.
Okay.
But I do see some problems with the area that I think needs to be addressed in a slightly different fashion. In its current iteration, I've got some grave concerns with where this project is going. Thanks. So, Andrew, Leslie, do you have anything you want to follow up with?
Mr. Chairman, the one thing to remember is, you know, with the easements and other things, I mean, we might, you know, those go into other private properties, and I think that, you know, I mean, in some cases it worked well when it was like one or two people working together. In other places it's been difficult. We've had to do takings and other things in order to get that to work. And I think, you know, there's some lacking public infrastructure in general in this area that has to be built up over time. There's not good sidewalks on Dave Street on the one side. So, I mean, I think you're right. Where we can, we want to get it to the property line, as you said, Joe, and then hope. But, you know, there's going to have to be other things done to link that up in the future. So I don't want you to get too, you know, to think that, yeah, I mean, we can extend easements through this property to lot lines, but you can't force other people on the other side to,
No.
you know, if they're not going to be willing to do it. So,
How did the Cape Cod Bank get connected through the commons?
that was a cooperative effort
Yes, it
where
was.
they did step
long
forward
time.
and they did work to make that happen.
Yeah.
So that was good.
That's good.
That doesn't always happen.
Sure.
But I believe there was an attorney who made it happen. I don't know.
It was a good model for that Mid-Island area, absolutely. I think the one thing, too, that I think Nat touched on is I think the turning ratio at the corner of Dave Street does need to be more rounded. I don't know about you all, but I seem to always hit the curb on that particular site here. I think if there's an opportunity to get that rounded, we did that with the Cumberland Farms, and I think we should do it here on that one-way road. So I think between now and the next meeting, we want to look a little bit at that street and what we can and can't do in the right-of-way.
Anything else? Anyone else?
I just have a quick one.
Go ahead.
Vis-a-vis the sidewalk on Dave Street, starting up at the Commons, I believe, starting with behind Sophie's, there is a sidewalk that goes all the way down to the corner, Andrew.
Yes.
We had the little park thing down there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is coming up a little bit up Dave Street, and then you have the two houses, one of which is almost at zero. But we're only talking maybe a 50-foot length once this is done that doesn't have a sidewalk. So we're not talking hundreds of feet. We're talking just in front of the two houses directly behind you on Dave Street. You might want to look to see if there is a way of extending that sidewalk so the two would then connect. Because clearly you don't run it across the access from the Commons out onto Dave, but just in front of those two houses is the only piece that would be left with no sidewalk. So, this might be something you want to look at.
We'll look at it.
Thanks.
Not a lot to work with there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, so if someone would like to comment on this, just raise your hand. And Mr. Cohen, good evening. Mr.
Chairman, Stephen Cohen. I represent the Commons. The abutter, I submitted a letter with some questions in it, and I will say that we met with Mr. McKinnon earlier this afternoon and got a lot of good information that helped resolve a lot of concerns. Some of them are still outstanding, and I think that they will probably positively be addressed here, but I just want to make those points for the record. One is that there shouldn't be any parking waivers. We're talking about a lot of housing here, and I think that this plan does provide the amount of parking that's required. But the major concern at the Commons is that there's a tremendous abuse of parking by non-customers, by people who live in the area or people who are using other places, and it makes it very difficult for the shopkeepers and the tenants there. And what we want to make sure is that this development provides its own parking so that that doesn't exacerbate the problem. I know that the planning board has, I think, very well tried to coerce and cajole commercial projects into sharing, and I think very successfully. But I do want to note that that's not a common practice for residential units and commercial units to suddenly be connected like that, and I think that there might be good reasons not to start that here. I think if it's very, very easy to get from that southern point of the Commons parking lot down to this unit, then it encourages sort of an abuse of those parking spaces. And the Commons really does think that having a fence there so that people go around would be beneficial to avoid the potential abuse from both sides, frankly, but also doesn't really change the amount of distance people have to go. Walking up Dave Street versus walking up that parking lot is essentially the same distance. It's not as if you have to really traverse far around. So I would hope that since the applicant is willing to put in that fence, that you wouldn't prevent that. Secondly, I think that in addition to providing the sufficient volume of parking, we should also make sure the planning board should also make sure that you do things that don't create unintended consequences on Orange Street. So, for example, there shouldn't be any post office boxes on Orange Street. I don't see any postal boxes here, but they should be either in the back or on Dave Street or something like that. And anything else that causes people to slow down and stop their car, or the postal truck, or deliveries or something. I don't see any sort of delivery area that could be here, but for this kind of volume, you might want to consider it. There's also a dumpster at the top corner that seems to be taking up what could be a prime parking space, and that dumpster could perhaps be relocated to a spot that's not such an obviously good parking space. Mr. McKinnon mentioned that they were looking at putting in bike racks. I think that's another good idea. And extending the sidewalk all the way is also another excellent idea. So if we could make pedestrian access as on Dave Street, that would be great. And also, if there was any way to get the out traffic onto Dave Street, that would also be good. I understand why the engineering is difficult, but it's certainly worth looking at, because trying to have all those cars come out onto Orange Street, I think, is potentially a nightmare scenario. But we'll see what the traffic study says. I'm not a traffic engineer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Can you please come to the microphone? You got to come up to one of the two. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
But this is for the TV. The TV can't pick you up.
Correct.
I just wasn't.
Can you
Cynthia
identify?
Lenhart from
You.
Compass Rose. I'm the
Thank you.
neighbor. I just wanted to ask how many parking spaces. You said 14 and 14, and then like 6 or 7 in the back. How many are they? And how many do you need if you're going to create 16 two-bedroom apartments? What would be the usual requirement? And what do they actually have? Was my question.
Sure. So currently we have 14 spaces under the building. This might help answer one of the questions that Attorney Cohen had as well. 14 spaces under the building, under each building, so that's 28, plus 6 at grade behind, so that's 34. Mm-hmm. And what we're hoping to do is seek waivers not to decrease quantity or volume of number of spaces, but to allows some flexibility with the size of those spaces, so potentially we can get 16 spaces versus the 14 beneath each of those buildings. And I believe the requirement is two per unit, and we have 16 units, so that's 32. We currently have 2 spaces in excess of that. We may be able to get more than that in excess of the requirement.
And is the parking underground or is it at ground level? Because there is a water table issue in this area that I am familiar with.
So the parking beneath the building drops down 2 feet from the grade of Orange Street. And on Dave Street, again, Dave Street continues to climb up in grade. But we're going to be doing test pits out there on Wednesday to confirm that we're okay.
Okay, you're going to have to really look at that. We were forced to put a retaining wall in, and I can tell you there's the water isn't too far down, guys. And you know, our sump, we had to put in a pump to keep our basement dry. So you may find even going a little bit underground could be an issue. But the parking is the big concern for me, and like you said, all the cars flowing in and out of there onto Orange, only onto Orange, is of great concern. I wish you could figure a way so that it could outlet onto Dave somehow. But because I do think when they do the parking study, they're going to see it's already very tough in the middle of the summer, and having that many more cars will make it tough. But I am glad to see something happen with those wrecks. Those 2 old houses need to go. And we need housing. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this? Seeing no one else at this point, our next meeting is scheduled for January 9th.
Right.
Does that work for you, gentlemen?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to continue to January 9th.
Great. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that my pen I gave you the last time?
Next before us is
I gave you that pen last
67-16,
time.
which is Macy Lane Commercial Development Amendment to 16D Macy's Lane, Unit D1 and D2 for the applicant. Mr. Swain?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members. For the record, Brian Swain, attorney for the applicant. This is a special permit application to modify a previously granted major commercial development special permit so that my client, the contract purchaser, can use Building D out by the AK Diamonds Condominium Association as a medical clinic. It's currently being used by Joseph Manning as a physical therapist office. There's no change to the parking under 139.18. It's within the CN zoning district, so according to the use chart, you have to have a special permit issued by the planning board to operate a medical clinic there. My client is a dentist, and he plans on operating a dentist office that specializes in pediatric dentistry. He's here this evening. If you have any questions about the application, I'd be happy to answer them. If you have any questions about his practice, he's available to respond to any questions.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions?
Sound good.
Anything from staff? No.
We recommended approval.
Pardon? Yeah, that's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this? Seeing no comment.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
We have a draft decision if the board would consider reviewing it tonight. This property is under contract, and it's been held up based on the permitting. So
Do you have it in your hand?
in my hand. If you would possibly consider it, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Great. That
Thank
brings
you.
us to, thank you, 6816 Nantucket Commons Amendment, Units 2.2 and 2.3 at 1B and 1C Freedom Square. Mr. Angelostro, good evening, sir.
Good evening. For the record, Michael Angelostro, the owner of the property, along with my wife Joanne, requesting something very similar to what the last applicant looked for. An additional use as possibly a medical office, dental office, etc. Parking is less onerous than as.
Michael, you got to get closer to the thing.
Yeah, it's
Parking is less.
I'm going to get you.
Thank you.
Want me to start over again?
No, I got it. But just
Okay,
get
parking
closer.
parking is less onerous than a regular office or retail, and allows for more flexibility for the property. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Board members, any questions?
I'm good.
Okay, anything from staff? Again?
And musical interlude.
She just got off work.
Bye.
Mine
Anyways.
is born to be wild. I mean, so we can
There
have
you
a
go,
whole
that's
thing
so
going.
true.
Oh, it's
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this? Seeing no comments.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously, and the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may make a comment, please.
Yes, sir.
I find this unusual to have a separate
Can you get a grip over there?
part of our zoning bylaw requiring a special permit for a medical office. I don't see any difference between a medical office, a physical therapy office, a dental office, and an attorney's office, for instance. So I don't understand why, and I'm wondering if this can just be as a matter of right.
I think I'd
It
probably
used to be.
defer. Let me have staff do this, but just from my perspective, I think just having an office where there's clerical and administrative things is one thing. These are clinics. Clinics can range across an entire spectrum of things. It could be a doctor's clinic, a doctor's office, so to speak, dental. It could be a detox center. It could be well. I'm not going to go too far at this point, but there are certain types of clinics which I think can draw in other types of things that the board should be a little bit more cognizant of, in terms of either clientele, in terms of toxic waste production maybe. Those are some things I think that the board needs to be cognizant of, and that's why I think we've gone to that special permit process. So let me turn it over to Andrew and Leslie, though, and just see if they can they can set me straight.
That's fine. If it's something that you might consider, I just find it highly unusual, especially when a lot of people don't even realize it's necessary to get this, and there are businesses opening that have never gotten it. And, I mean, drugstores have a lot of drugs in them. Should they be part of this also? I don't know. But thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So next thing before us at this point is 69-16, which is Island Kitchen, also known as the Hen House on One Chin's Way. Before the applicant, good evening.
Yes, for the record, Rhoda Wyman representing the applicant, and I'm here with Paul Santos, who is the surveyor, and he will talk about the plan and explain some of that, and our client is also here this evening if you have any questions. The Island Kitchen one is real simple. It's probably the easiest one you're ever going to see. We're asking to change the hours from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. For an early breakfast crowd, and from midnight to 1, which is typical for restaurants.
Just one thing I want to bring up for the record at this point. I work next door to them at Island Pharmacy. I don't have any financial interest in this whatsoever, but I am close enough to them, so I just want to bring that up for the record.
And we're
if there's any
comfortable with
problems, I
you.
would really appreciate anyone bringing it up. but
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the only other thing I want to add on this is that we currently have in our existing permit permission to be opened outside until 11, and that will continue as well.
So, board members, any discussion on this? Hearing nothing, anything from
I'm
staff?
fine.
Okay. This, no. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the 1 a.m. request is consistent with the hours of operation for other businesses in the Mid-Island, so we recommend approval.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone would like to comment on this.
Motion to close the public hearing, and happy birthday, Rhoda. Thank you,
Oh,
Linda.
is it? Happy birthday.
Where would I want to be other than here?
You're not to live it up.
It's Frank Sinatra's birthday.
There you go.
That's right.
All right, so the motion's made and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously in the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, now that brings us to 716, Bonita Bar LLC. That's the Massachusetts Limited Liability Corp. on 2 and 4 Chins Way.
Again, Rhoda Wyman for the applicant. This was formerly the Gray Lady, which I'm sure you all remember for many different reasons. The building was recently purchased by my client. The plan is to combine this building with the Island Kitchen. They'll be combining it for the purpose of licensing and for permitting. The buildings will be connected by a pergola. I've been through this with the ABCC just in terms of liquor licensing, and just want everyone to be clear that they will be connected for this purpose as well. The former permit for the Gray Lady allowed 127 seats, and we are going to reduce the number of seats to 100. So that's a significant reduction. Of the 100 seats that we're going to have, 57 of them will be on the outside patio, 15 will be on the first floor, and 28 on the second floor. On the first floor, the 15 seats will be for restaurant service, and we're going to have a donut and ice cream takeout station, which everybody's really excited about. Certainly I am. And that will operate every day, 7 days a week, from 6 a.m. To 2 a.m. There'll be a kitchen on the first floor as well, and that'll be used for the restaurant and also for catering. There'll be one 600-square-foot retail space, and at this point we don't have a tenant identified yet, but when we do, we will go back to staff and advise of the tenant. There'll be outdoor landscaping, a common area to include benches, and that's just for patrons waiting to get into the restaurant, to wait there, and they can have their ice cream and donuts there if they wish. There's no service at these tables, and it'll be separated also by railroad ties so that it won't look like an area that will have service. Since Island Kitchen has approval for the outside service, as I mentioned, until 11, we're requesting the same closing time since the two properties are going to be combined. There are currently 2 bars existing on the premises. One is in the patio area, and the other one is on the second floor, and both of these bars will continue to be in use. The second floor restaurant will have 28 seats, and that's a continuation of the first floor restaurant, and it'll also be used for private functions. The restaurant, upstairs and downstairs, of course, and the donut and ice cream business are in the same ownership, and that's the same owner that owns the real estate as well. Before I turn it over to Mr. Santos, does anybody have any questions thus far on any of the things that I've gone through?
I'm not saying anything, so proceed.
Okay. Paul will talk about the parking and the plan, and then I'll be back.
Thank you, Rhoda. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. Some of the items that Rhoda spoke about we'll kind of go through again, and we'll directly point to the site plan itself with regard to the location of the proposed retail area, seating, parking, and so forth as I go through my presentation. Essentially, we have 3 properties here that we are looking to consolidate into one MCD. 1 Chins Way is what we know as Island Kitchen, which is this rectangular parcel here. Oddly enough, these spaces that are here are not part of that lot. That lot line comes along here, around,
in that particular area. So that's 1 Chins Way. 2 and 4 Chins Way are essentially 2 parcels, which includes this piece of flag here, around the backside here, and then the northerly portion of the lot, which doesn't contain any buildings. So essentially 1, 2, and 4 Chins Way. And what the owner is trying to do here is essentially create a family-friendly restaurant, takeout, eating area that'll encompass essentially the existing buildings that are now on site. That includes Island Kitchen, what was formerly the Gray Lady, and there's also a residential structure here at the backside of what was formerly the Gray Lady that will be incorporated still as housing in the particular plan for expansion. The connection road I talked about is essentially a pergola, if you will, which would go from the Island Kitchen to the Gray Lady in this particular area here. So you'd have that pergola in that particular area, which would blend this all together as essentially one complex. The lot areas themselves, 2 and 4 contain approximately 16,032 square feet in total area. 1 Chins Way, which is Island Kitchen, is about 5,480 square feet. We are in the CMI zoning district. The property was essentially rezoned from RC to the CMI district in the 2016 annual town meeting, so the zoning is new to this particular area. We are also located in the Mid-Island Planned Overlay District, and we are also in the Public Wellhead Recharge District with regard to our 2 overlay districts. Ground cover presently existing, the number 1 is about 23% in a zone that allows 50, and 2 and 4 is only about 18%. Again, in the CMI zone, we are now allowed 50% ground cover. CMI zone also has 0 front yard, side, and rear yard setbacks. So even though these properties are different with regard to zoning, we do have a 0 lot line setback requirement now within the CMI zoning district. We are allowed to go to 40-foot height. There is no change, though, proposed to the elevations of the structure. So with regard to the plan itself, Rhoda had mentioned, so the restaurant, Island Kitchen continues to operate as you now know it, Island Kitchen, front porch here. It's got its designated parking and loading area to the westerly side of the existing structure. So the restaurant containing 15 interior seats, those would be contained on the first floor. You would come in the same, essentially the same area that you now come into what was the Gray Lady, and those 15 seats would be on the first floor in this particular area here. 57 exterior patio seats would occur in essentially partially what is now the outdoor bar area and patio of the Gray Lady here. That outdoor area here, which would be underneath the pergola connection, would be our 57 exterior patio seats. The donut and ice cream takeout service would occur in this particular area. The front portion of this existing structure here would be where your donut and ice cream takeout service station would be. The proposed 6,000 square foot retail space would be along this side of the building in this particular area here. It's actually dashed in there. It's this rectangular here would be your proposed 600 square foot retail. You would have a kitchen on that first floor for catering and for the second floor use. So the backside here would be your kitchen area contained within that building. And then we are also creating an outdoor landscape common area, which would include seating and benches and would also exclude table service. So that would be separate from the patio. And that's this particular area that you kind of see right in here. It's currently a fenced-in area as part of the Gray Lady, but that area would have some added landscaping, some shade trees, and then also some built-in benches around the trees and some benches in this particular area here. That would serve as a waiting area for access to the restaurants, and then also an area where the takeout station is here. You might come over here, eat your ice cream, eat your donut, and then kind of move on. So that's what that area right in here is. On the second floor, again, of this structure here, we're talking about an event space containing 28 seats. So when we look at the entirety of that, the upstairs restaurant space is combined with the downstairs restaurant space, the donut and ice cream operation, the patio, for a total essentially of one restaurant establishment in this particular building. 15 seats on the first floor, 28 seats on the second floor, 57 seats on the patio, for a total of 100 seats. Rhoda had alluded to the fact that the current Gray Lady permit allows for 127 seats, strictly restaurant, bar, and so forth. So we're reducing that by 27 seats under the existing permit. For the purposes of parking calculations, essentially the site will function the same as it does today or it has in the past, which is there are 25 seats associated with 2 and 4 Chins Way. Those are 4 parking spaces here, with the remainder in this area here, in the middle, and along the westerly property line here. So Chins Way, oddly enough, when you look here, this L shape here, that's the entire Chins Way right-of-way. It's all paved as you come in, so this portion here is Chins Way. The remainder is part of the commercial lot. But in a sense, we've laid out parking, not including any parking that potentially could take space in here in Chins Way. There are additional spaces that do get used in here, but we've laid this out strictly in accordance with the zoning regulations, staying on the lot, meeting the aisle widths, meeting the parking width sizes, and we're looking at 25 spaces that exist on the site today, and they will exist after this proposal is done. The Island Kitchen has 8 spaces allocated to it, and it also has a loading zone allocated to it. So those spaces are in here, along here, and then the loading zone is here. That's all part of approvals that were done when the Island Kitchen was renovated, the porch was added, and so forth. So those spaces continue to exist. 25, the 8 here, and we do have a designated loading zone with the Island Kitchen. So on the 2 and 4 Chins Way property, when we look at the parking calculations, first floor, 15 seats at 1 per 6. We are allowed 1 per 6 in the CMI. Would be 3 spaces. Second floor, 28 seats at 1 per 6 would be 5 spaces. The patio at 1 per 6, 57 seats would require 9. The first floor takeout service station would be 5 spaces, which is basically 5 spaces per station. There's 1 takeout station. Retail stores and services, even though we are not designating at this point a tenant, it still would be parked at 1 per 200 under a commercial use, which would be 3 spaces. Employees, 1 per 3 at peak shift. We're saying 9 for 3 spaces. And then the employee housing, per the existing permit that exists, there was a designation for 2 spaces for the employee housing. That's a total of 30 spaces. And again, we're talking now essentially just about 2 and 4 because Island Kitchen is already parked in accordance with its existing permit. A total of 30 spaces. That would be a standard 29, 1 accessible for the total of 30. Now, we're in the Mid-Island Planned Overlay District. We're also in the CMI. We do have certain features that are particular to this site that do give us some parking credits. As many of you know who know this area, we have the chicken box here, we have the pharmacy here, we have what was, I guess, Foods for Here and There over here, now is something different, I believe. But all those kind of properties in this area seem to work together and have worked together for a number of years. As part of the permit for the original Gray Lady or original Bamboo in this area here, we designated pedestrian access easements or pedestrian access points as part of that 06 permit. There is an access point here, which is a stairway that comes down into this property off of the chicken box property here. There is also an access point here, which gets you down towards what was Food for Here and There in this area here. So we have that pedestrian access through this property that's never been restricted. It's been encouraged. And under the MyPod regulations, whatever your parking requirements are, you get a 10% credit for pedestrian access, for shared parking, and so forth and so on. So that would be a credit of 3 spaces. When we look at taking the 30, take 10% of that, we'd have a credit of 3 spaces available to us because we're providing this kind of pedestrian-friendly environment. There also are provisions within the MyPod for public parking spaces within 500 feet of a particular site. Again, as part of the original permit here, there are spaces out on Dave Street. I think at least 5 spaces that are public spaces on Dave Street within 500 feet of our property that can be utilized as public spaces. Since the time that original permit happened here, we had Stop and Shop come in. We do have public spaces in front of Stop and Shop also. I did not look at those at all. I simply looked at what we had originally designated as the 5 spaces on Dave Street. So when you look at the credits that are potentially available, you have the 3 spaces for the pedestrian access. You have the 5 spaces that exist for the Dave Street component. That's a total of 8 spaces. We're asking for essentially a waiver, if you will, of 5 spaces on the subject plan. So we'd have 30 required. We have 25 on the site. And I'm not including these 8 because I'm designating these for Island Kitchen under the previous permit. So whether that needs to be a waiver or not, I've asked for the waiver, but they are credits. They are a waiver that is a credit available to us as part of work within the MyPod zoning, the MyPod overlay district. The waivers we're seeking with regard to the entire basically development is a waiver for open space. The application, this site has already developed. No additional site work we anticipate will take place that will decrease the open space that presently exists. We are adding features here with regard to some shade trees, the location of the patio area here for the outdoor seating, and then essentially this area here is currently open along the back side, along this side and here, and there is some openings up in this area here. There is also some green space along the perimeter of the property to the north and also along this area here. Waiver in the inclusionary housing. The applicant is providing on-site employee housing, which is subject to a covenant enforceable by the planning board. So that on-site housing already has a recorded covenant with regard to it being set aside as housing. That is recorded. That will stay in place. Waivers for parking. Actually, because of the way this layout is set, where the porch is here and where Chin's Way is here, those spaces, if I lay in a 9 by 20, I extend into that Chin's Way layout here by about 2 feet. So those spaces there, where I've got them shown here as 9 by 20, essentially on the lot itself, they're only 9 by 18. So just to bless that, we've asked for a waiver of the 2 feet and those spaces 1 through 4, although they will be laid out as 20, but a portion of them will be within Chin's Way. Chin's Way is a private way. It is not public. So we've asked for that particular waiver. The 5 spaces I had just alluded to, pursuant to Section 139(12G) 3E, the applicant is eligible for waivers of up to 8 spaces. Screening and parking areas, waivers, existing landscaping and fencing screens the parking area from the surrounding properties. However, some have said screening is not on the subject site. In the event that the existing level of screening is decreased or removed, the applicant has agreed to plant additional landscaping and install fencing around the perimeter to screen the property. We're talking about these areas particularly here. We do not want to block access, but we're talking about these areas in here. This area here is pretty well screened. We have the building, which will screen the patio from these abutting properties, and there is some screening that does exist. There's fencing along this property line. There's evergreen screening along this property line. We have asked for a waiver of site plan review. Again, the subject site is already developed, approved, and no additional site work is proposed that would change essentially what we're doing. The drainage is in place. There is already a water quality certificate in place for the existing drainage parking that had been done on past permitting. So we're not looking to essentially expand any of that. The drainage is in place, and we have those items already in place, whereas we're not looking to go and re-engineer this site and add any drainage or do anything different than what's already out there at the present time. You do have, I think, an elevation, Holly, that I have it on the board to my left, but I can just briefly show you what the facade of these 2 buildings look like. They are presently, or did receive approval the other night at the HDC for the pergola. So here is Island Kitchen. Here is what was the Gray Lady as the new proposed building. If we can pan down, go to that one right there, Holly. So here's our pergola connection. Here's our outdoor common seating area. The entrance here to the donut, the restaurant itself, but the donut ice cream takeout. This would be the proposed retail. So there'd be a doorway here, and then you have that existing overhang and doorway in this area. Island kitchen, again, the front porch, the island kitchen itself. And then in the background, this is actually I think you're looking at the housing component in the backside of there. Essentially what goes away here, there's that outdoor bar. Rhoda again had alluded, the bar, you have one single bar now for this entire complex, and this becomes more of a outdoor seating area with no outdoor bar in that particular area there. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but I think Rhoda's going to kind of come back around here and talk about what conditions we've actually put into the application that the applicant is willing to incorporate into any decision that this board may render on the project. But happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yep. So, board members, any questions at this point? Go ahead.
It's all great, wonderful. I just have one question on the site plan, if you want to go back to the site plan for just 1 second. Little purple area where you got the takeout.
I'm sorry.
Go this way.
Where's that?
Right, go right up.
Where are you going?
Not that far. You see that black area right there?
Yeah.
Go left, left. There. What is that?
That wording right there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just labeling that gets me into the. There's nothing. That's just the parking lot. That's
Okay.
just
Arrows pointing down.
Because I couldn't quite figure out what was happening
Yeah, no,
there.
that's
'Cause
just
I
an
know there's
arrow-
nothing
that's just
there.
an arrow pointing down here because that's the retail component, and then that's the. I think I'm flagging in here what I've got.
So the floor plan is just there. It's an open floor plan with
It's
just walk
just,
through.
Labeling on the plan. It's
Okay.
not.
I wasn't sure there was something outside or inside that you were talking about. Otherwise, I'm fine. I was fine about a half hour ago. Just
Go ahead, Joe.
I have a question
Yeah,
for
that's fine.
Rhoda.
No, I can correct it. No, you go ahead, Rhoda. So Rhoda's going to go through and go ahead. What is your question?
No, I have a question for Rhoda. Just looking, I'm pretty good with everything. The only thing that strikes or sticks out is the 2 a.m. hour of operation for the takeout service. Seems like everything is 1 o'clock, which is great, but there are housing around there. If the orange slice has housing right next door, I know you have employee housing there on site. You also have employee housing over the island kitchen and the Sarah Dickinson property where there's housing right behind that. And I'm just wondering with the 2 o'clock hour of operation for the takeout, how people linger on and 2 o'clock becomes 3 o'clock in the open seating area there.
Well,
And
I
I'm
think
just wondering, being consistent with the other businesses, if 1 o'clock, if there was a reason why you extended the extra hour.
early breakfast with donuts and late ice cream. I mean, I think that's really, we wanted to have that option because there aren't a lot of places that are available, and we'd like to be able to do that. They've never had any complaints with the property at all, and we'd like to at least be able to try it. And if there is a problem, then we can come back and change it. But we would like to be able to start with it.
Okay.
And I just have one.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Go
ahead. I had mentioned earlier that there are 2 bars on the property, one outside, which exists now, and one on the second floor. Both of those bars will remain in place.
When I think it might have been before Patrick got it, there was an adjustment for a takeout. I think the previous owner, remember? Yeah, the ZBA had it at one point. They asked to go to 2 o'clock on the takeout, and then we reassessed it, and there were no complaints about it at that point.
Right.
So,
In the island.
yeah, I think before Patrick got it. Just before.
It was because
You had it also? Yeah, because there were
I
no
did it.
complaints because we reassessed it, and there were no complaints about it at that point. So,
Yep. Okay.
just
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Steve. Yeah.
What is the what's the increase in the exterior patios now to what is being proposed?
In terms of numbers of seats,
What's the increase?
well, it's a decrease.
Decrease.
You're decreasing the exterior patio seats?
Well,
No, I'm asking how many exterior seats are proposed?
There are 57 proposed now.
What is there now?
No, there was never any designation, I don't, for them, what I saw, in
They didn't
the
have a
existing
breakdown.
permits, they strictly said you have
127
127 seats allocated for the Gray Lady, or Bamboo, or whatever it was at the time. It didn't designate,
That's
they
right.
had the outdoor patio area, but it wasn't designated, there wasn't a designated seating out there.
And has it been used? There's been no designated seating out there?
Well, it's an outdoor patio with a
No, but I'm
bar.
asking
Right.
is, has it been used, I'm just asking a simple question. Has the outdoor patio been used for exterior seating to go? And if so, how many seats?
I don't think we know because it never was designated. I mean, if you
It was
weren't.
more of an outdoor gathering, it was a bar, you stood out there,
So
you
it's an
drank.
increase of 57 seats?
No, they were always outside seats.
Yeah.
There was never any designation as to how many they could have, and now we're saying 57.
You're formalizing the number.
That's right.
That wasn't there before.
And he didn't own the building.
But we're decreasing by 27 in total,
Relative to the overall and the interior?
Correct.
relative to the total property, correct.
All set? Okay. David?
Is the bar at the island kitchen going away? Or the counter, which kind of serves as both, that going away?
No.
No? I was just misunderstanding. You said there's two on there.
Two on the new premises, on 2 to 4. Well, on the old 2 to 4 Chins Way has 2 existing bars, and they will remain. Nothing is changing at Island Kitchen. Correct.
Anyone else on the board? Eddie?
You're not merging these two properties, but under the MCD, because the same owner owns side-by-side properties, it's all part of one MCD. But you're not getting rid of the lot line that separates these guys. So
We're not
just
getting
let's
rid of
be
the
clear.
lot line, but we're doing the pergola to connect the
Connect
two
them.
for the
But the
purposes.
MCD covers everything because they're contiguous
Right,
lots.
exactly,
But they
but-
are not merging under zoning.
No, but
just
what
don't want
we
you
are
to go there.
merging for the purposes of a liquor license is the pergola connecting the two properties.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be one liquor license, which is really not a concern here, but that's what we're doing for the selectmen.
Anyone
So,
else? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to tell you the conditions that we have agreed to, if
Okay.
you'd like to hear them.
Brad, just briefly.
Okay. Oh, they'll be brief.
Thank you.
Okay. As we have mentioned before, the dwelling on the lot will be for employee housing only, and that's recorded as a covenant at the registry. No food or alcohol will be served on the patio after 11 o'clock. No music amplified after 11 o'clock. Takeout service of operation 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. with seating limited to 1 o'clock. Inside, no, obviously not outside after 11. Second floor restaurant or event space shall not serve food or alcohol after 1 a.m. And a final site plan will be submitted to you.
Great. Anything else, board members? Anything? Andrew, Leslie, Holly? Go ahead.
No, Mr. Chairman, we met with the applicants early on this, and we think this is a big improvement and a great project for the area, so we recommend it.
Good, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Motion to approve with those conditions.
Okay. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Next before us is 71-16, Frederick T. Galliardo and Melissa K. Kaiser on 6 Tom Nevers Road.
Motion to approve.
Is there anyone for the applicant? Not seeing you raising for the occasion there, Mr. Cohen.
Do you really have to get up?
No, I don't think so. I'm here, but this is, I think, relatively simple, and I can say
Yep.
nothing if the board would prefer. Thanks.
Board members, do you have any?
So
Do you
moved.
have any questions for him? Not seeing any at this point. There he goes. Any comment from the public?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes
Motion
have
to approve.
unanimously. And second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. We've got to
Go
jump
back
back.
to the A&R.
There you go. You got it.
Where are we going?
Got to go back to the A&R,
Hold on.
which was hanging out there.
Frederick Galliard.
Where is it?
It's on page 2.
Where?
So it's number 8064, Frederick T. Galliardo, 6 Tom Nevers Road.
I don't, oh, it's up by itself. I see it.
There you go.
We just approved.
Motion to endorse the A&R.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Blah. That brings us 72-16, Cedar Crest 3, 1 Mayflower Circle, Cooperative Incorporated. Mr. Cohen, hello again.
Mr. Chairman, I suspect this might take more talking.
Just a tad.
Just a tad. Okay. So I think the board is probably familiar with this neighborhood and where this house is. The house is about 3,600 square feet plus a basement and has 6 bedrooms. It is part of a co-op so that there's the front house is separately owned and is, I think, about 800 square feet. What my client, the Great Harbor Yacht Club, is proposing is for a neighborhood employee housing permit, which I think you know is something that is widely needed and rarely applied for. And in this case, I think would be a great benefit if it was issued. The applicant proposes to limit the premises to no more than 12 occupants, is willing to put a limitation on the number of vehicles. I think there's presently 5 vehicles on the property. That limitation would be fine, and is proposing a number of conditions that would maintain the residential character of the neighborhood and not allow it to become what I think the neighbors fear, but shouldn't. This would be a highly regulated property, both from what the permit that's being requested and from the employer that would be in charge. There's a proposed list of conditions that I think would be appropriate, and frankly, if the board wanted more, we're open to considering more. And this permit, as you know, is open to being reopened and reconditioned if something were to go wrong. So the onus is always on my client to keep the property in shape or risk losing the value that they've purchased. I could go on, but I'm happy to take questions. I'm also happy to address the letter now, or I can wait until after the abutters speak.
I think I'm going to have you wait on that for a few moments. So, board members, any questions at this stage?
Steve, currently, with 6 bedrooms,
Yep.
the current owners could put as many people as they want to in there before the health department got called, with no control.
That's right.
If it goes to a dormitory or a neighborhood housing, employee housing, controlled by the Great Harbor Yacht Club and controlled by the planning board, because we have to adopt the management plan, the conditions, the parking, and everything else that goes with it, we dial down on this property where it's under scrutiny between us, the management system, and the Great Harbor Yacht Club. And should there be a problem, we can reopen it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So potential chaos is replaced by something that is completely controlled by multiple entities, including if there's any complaints from the neighborhood. And sometimes on these things, we put a review, a 1-year review on these things to come back again the following year after a summer of operation. And if there are complaints on the record, if there's a problem, we open the permit back up again. So it's not an endless situation.
Yeah.
There are checks and balances put on it through a special permit for this reason.
I think that's right, Linda, that frankly, the use in this neighborhood and many other neighborhoods is often rental and fill it with no conditions and no permitting and no anything in place. And, I used to, as you know, live in this neighborhood, and there were dozens of illegal apartments. There were many businesses that would rent out for summer housing, and there was no rules in place, and the planning board had no conditions, and there was no one you could call when there was a problem. And I think, frankly, my client shouldn't be treated poorly for finally doing the right thing. There's a lot more of these permits that really should be issued. I'd also note that this neighborhood has on one side a bunch of 20,000 square foot lots, nearly all of which have been cut up into 2-unit co-ops, and on the 2-acre side, town meeting has adopted the zoning change down to 1-acre zoning. So you're seeing a lot of density already in the area. It's not as if this use is going to bring density where there's not already density. You're well aware of the Richmond Great Point development going on next door that's going to have a lot of single-family homes and a lot of apartment buildings. So I think this use is not out of character with what's going on in the area. The boogeyman scenario, I think, is sort of out of character, but that's not what we're proposing. What we're proposing is a well-regulated residential situation. And I think that the Great Harbor Yacht Club is sort of a high visibility owner that doesn't, frankly, want this kind of, it doesn't want headaches from this. And I think that they are the kind of owner where you can hold them liable and responsible. And, Stephen Kreis, who's the general manager, is here, and the last thing he wants is to come back because there's a zoning violation proposed and you're going to be taking away the value of his property. That is not something that they're going to want to be dealing with. So they have a high incentive to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And in fact, Linda, I think your suggestion of having it revisited in a year is an excellent one, because it really keeps the heat to the fire without someone having to make a complaint.
But you have 6 bedrooms. Theoretically, there are 12 occupancy now,
Right.
and you're proposing 12?
Well, a limit of 12. I think that I don't know how many people would actually end up in there. Some might be singles, some might be couples, some might be 2 individuals. I think the intent is to try to keep this at the sort of management and professional level, not just fill it with waiters and waitresses, not a bunch of kids. Nothing against waiters and waitresses, but there's a need for the housing that's the people who they want to provide housing for, that they want to attract, are the people at a higher level within the business. So this benefit would go to them.
Okay, thanks. Parking. Are you involved with the other unit at all? The other co-op unit? Or is this involved with this, or is that separate?
Not really. I mean, legally it's one lot as a co-op,
Right.
but there's no...
Is there a separate owner for the other one?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I'm after. And you're going to provide housing, I guess bus passes will be part of the management plan.
Yeah.
And
Great Harbor already, under its MCD, has to provide bus passes, but so
Okay.
tagging that on here is fine. It would be redundant, but it's
But
fine.
otherwise, you're going to provide parking on site.
Well, what we're proposing is 4 or 5 parking spaces, but frankly, Great Harbor doesn't allow its employees to park at the yacht club, so they would have really nowhere to drive to. Very few of their employees either have cars or bring them. They provide bus passes. They actually have a fleet of bikes that they provide to their employees on a seasonal basis. They do not want 12 people showing up with 12 cars, and that's not the practice. But a condition on no street parking would be acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, frankly, there has been a lot of street parking on that street, and this would be an improvement to see it end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have something?
Yeah, the only thing I was concerned about was the parking. 12 people, most of the time it's 12 cars, but
Yeah,
I'll take your word for it that you can take care of that.
I think we could take a reasonable limitation to keep a residential look, a restriction against on-street parking, and a check-in that if there's a dozen cars there, you're going to know really quick.
Okay.
Well, a lot of these employees are seasonal.
That's true.
So for a large percentage of the year, the occupancy would be a lot less.
Yeah, I don't think it would be necessarily empty. I think we'd
Not
see how
empty,
it
but
goes,
less.
but you'd see certainly a seasonal peak.
Anyone else on the board? David?
Well, I see in your policy, you have no on-site parking on Great Harbor Yacht Club property, which this will become.
Yeah.
So why are you looking for parking?
Well, I think that means
No, that's
the
downtown.
facility.
Can't.
Well, yeah, but it's all part of what you submitted as part of the Flower Circle housing plan.
Right. I guess what I would do is clarify that we mean commercial facility, not the residential. I see how that is unclear now.
Okay. Steve?
Is the employee housing management plan, is that our draft, or is that something the applicant provided?
It's something we provided, although frankly it's based on conditions that the planning board tends to like in these situations.
Okay, I would make some suggestions on that. There are some provisions in here that, for instance, the occupants shall be employees of an owner or tenant licensed by their respective employers, and it goes on to state that basically what the language stipulates is that the unit could be rented out to employees to house their employees. I'm not suggesting that's the intent, but that's what the language stipulates, 4 and 5. So what I would ask is that we tighten up the language so that this is specifically to Great Harbor Yacht Club employees. Then I had, I would ask that we attach the Great Harbor Yacht Club off-site housing policies to the management plan, making it part of the management plan by reference, and that any changes to the off-site housing policies would have to be brought before this group. You know, you're basically outlining conditions that everyone has to follow.
Right.
They should become part of the application. They should become part of the approval if it's approved. And if they're proposed to be changed,
yeah,
they should come back to us. Is what I would suggest.
Can I make just a quick comment on that? I don't approve. I don't disagree with the theory, but I wouldn't want to see that recorded as a recorded document where we'd have to make that kind of change. There's a lot of things in there that are like the rent and who the manager is. So I think my recommendation would be either to pull out the pieces that are important, or just have it be a staff document that would be in the file of the planning board, so that it didn't become overly burdensome to try and change the rent or something like that. But the theory is fine.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you'd understand the concept, so I appreciate that. That's my opinion on what we might want to do. I'd obviously leave it to staff to incorporate and tighten it up. Along the lines of tightening it up, there was just a couple other comments. The planning board, it stipulates that the planning board shall retain the right to review the special permit in the event that Great Harbor Yacht Club is no longer the employer tenant of the property owner, which I'm not really just like sure what that means. But I would like to, if this is binding on the planning board, I would suggest that it be to the effect that the planning board can, retains the right to review the special permit at will, and in the event that there's a change in ownership. And then there was another comment in here about parking, and it just said that the Great Harbor Yacht Club would discourage parking cars on the property in the street. And if I think you suggested on your behalf of the applicant that they would prohibit it, so I'd want to see that changed in there too.
Yeah, the second one about prohibiting on-street parking is fine, and I think that just to back up, some of that language is targeted towards the people, so it reads a little funny when you consider it, when you try to make it a condition. But the planning board's statutory authority to reopen the permit is something that wouldn't be limited by the language that's in there. The language is actually an additional thing that says that, basically because Great Harbor Yacht Club is putting its integrity on the line here and saying, hey, trust us a little bit, that, that the permit doesn't necessarily just go to anybody. So if Great Harbor down the road decided to sell it to someone who may not have the same incentives to keep up their good name and to cooperate, that the permit would essentially be invalid without the planning board assigning it. So I think that's and then also if you combine that with Linda's idea of having a one-year checkup, sort of regardless, there's a lot of checkup there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Anything? Andrew, Leslie? Yeah, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. Stephen, I noticed that you signed the application as the owner, but you said you're not representing the other co-op or condo unit owner. So the special permit has to run with the land, so how's that going to work?
The special permit can be recorded against the leasehold area as opposed to the entire lot. which I think would be appropriate. And then the Dugans, who are the current owners, I could certainly get a letter submitted if you want that for the record. Does that answer sort of your question, or are you looking for the co-op to submit a letter?
Okay, I think that addresses our concerns.
Okay, so I will have both of those. I will have the Dugan submit an assent, and I will, just for the record, clarify that what we're seeking is a permit that would only apply to the leasehold area.
Anyone else? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing, so if someone would like to comment on this. Hi.
Good evening. Scott Allen, 25B Daffodil Lane. Before I speak, maybe we could get Andrew to address the letter that we sent concerning the deeds and restrictions for our HOA.
Mr. Cohen was going to do that, actually.
Single family. I'd love it if he could talk about it now before I address my concerns.
I'm happy to address it, and if Andrew wants to follow up, he's
go ahead.
Welcome to. So I think there were 2 or 3. One of the concerns raised in the letter was that this was somehow a commercial use, which I think it's obviously not. It's a residential use by a business. There are a number of properties in the area that are owned by LLCs and owned by businesses. It doesn't make them a commercial use. It's just a residential use. There's no commercial activity. There's no retail. There's no wholesale. There's no whatever. The second issue raised was that there's a the original permit for this subdivision has some language that says that no building shall be constructed except a single-family dwelling and a second dwelling not more than 800 square feet. And I would take the position that this use is not outside of that condition. This is a single-family dwelling that was constructed as a single-family dwelling, and this permit does not. This type of use is an other use. It's not a commercial use. It's not a different kind of residential use. It's just a, hey, if you do that, you need to come in because we put conditions on it. I don't think it runs afoul of that language, and frankly, I would ask the planning board to consider that question and put something in its decision that addresses that issue, because I think ongoing, nobody really wants to be in a fight about it. This use does not change that is not inconsistent with that decision, with that language. And that. And then I think the applicant, or some of the abutter suggested that this was an inconsistent use with the neighborhood and that it was somehow going to be a detriment to the neighborhood. And I guess what I would suggest is that is entirely possible if not limited correctly. And what we're coming to you is to saying, hey, we want to do the right thing here and we want to have the right conditions to ensure that it's a proper residential use with controls in place by both the owner and the planning board.
Okay. Thank you. I wish Mr. Cohen still lived in the neighborhood. I think he'd probably have a different view on the subject. I do live on this road. This particular house is directly at the very end of our subdivision. So there's not one car or bicycle that's not going to use this roadway that we have. What used to be the Dugan's family, they're looking to sell, and they'd like to sell it to someone who puts 12 people in there. I find it very hard to believe that they're not going to have cars on the street, and I know you can put restrictions on that, but I just don't think that that's realistic to think. But you're talking about separate keys, separate rooms, essentially a dormitory that is a fence away from one of the largest pieces of workforce housing this island's ever put together. So why drag it across the fence? It doesn't make any sense. You're already sort of half dismantling our neighborhood by the rezoning that we did last year for Richmond, and now we're going to do it again, one more house. And then maybe the neighbor across the street wants to sell his house, and the only person who will buy it is another business. And that's going to become workforce housing. We have to draw the line. This is a subdivision that has deeds and restrictions, and we just like the planning board, who gave us these deeds and restrictions originally, to stick to them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I think you do understand, though, what it means to put a special permit in place, correct? All right, which means that if it doesn't work, we can, or you can come back to us and request that the public hearing be reopened. So, I dare say it's not just a done deal, never to be looked at again. There is that ability for us to come back if it's not working well. So some of the things that you've conjectured, I think, can be very easily handled. But either we need to be made aware of it. Thank you. Howdy.
Dave Small, 23 Daffodil. So basically, by saying that, Mr. Chairman, you're saying that our points that have been put up in the letter are suitable under the planning board's deeds and restrictions?
As far as I know, Andrew, do you want to?
So, Mr. Chairman, the standard here is that it has to be a dwelling unit under the definition of neighborhood housing and under the definition of the restrictions. So it has to remain a single-family dwelling unit. So there is nothing that says that 6 or 12 unrelated individuals can't live together. They have to live as a single household. So there can't be additional kitchens introduced. They need to be functioning, living together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some clear restrictions about that. That you can't discriminate based on, you can't say only a family with children can live in household units. Groups of individuals can live there. So it would need to maintain its status as a single-family house as opposed to the danger is it becomes a rooming house or an unlicensed rooming house where people... And there's a case from the Vineyard on this where people weren't ever, sharing the same kitchen. They all lived in their rooms, all had hot plates, all had locked doors. That is what it can't become, or it does run afoul of that restriction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's partly it's part of the management requirement that it needs to maintain its character as a single-family house, that the group that lives there function as a household as opposed to separate individuals. Those are the kind of things that you want to put your conditions on to make sure it stays like that. Is that clear? I mean, you need to refer to the definitions of what the neighborhood employee housing is. A residential component, though. It is classified with other residential options. And again, private unrelated individuals can live together without any conditions,
mm-hmm.
and then it is an enforcement matter. So I think as Linda said originally, there's strength to having special permit conditions. There's really more enforcement teeth with that, as opposed to people randomly just living together.
No, I appreciate that clarity. Understand that there's nothing else in our neighborhood that's permitted like this.
And Mr. Chairman, there's a limitation where in residential areas nothing else can be permitted within 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
So there's not a concentration and that's in a residential district. Now in commercial districts, there's not such a spatial restriction, but anywhere in the rest of the R20 or R40, there would be no other one would be allowed within 1,000 feet.
So if the front house that's also a member of that leasehold wanted to apply for the same type of thing, they wouldn't be allowed to do it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Do we have proof that there are none?
That there's what?
That there are none within 1,000 feet already permitted?
We don't, but I think there are very, very few of these permitted anywhere, frankly.
That's true.
I'm just saying, that's I didn't know that's important.
I
wasn't
well,
trying to feel like that just came up, but I'm saying that's something we ought to know before we approve it.
Yeah. I'm sure that there are not any approved in this neighborhood or at the
1,000 feet's a lot.
Right. Yeah.
I think
it is.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Cohen, strangely enough, heard you as well too, because the last thing he wants right now is for this to go forward and then find out, oh my God, something around us was a problem.
Yeah.
So believe me, I think somewhere between now and tomorrow morning, he's going to be diligently.
We'll double check
reviewing.
that, but
Yeah, other than that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, and I do want to say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just one other clarification that the total number of persons is by lot, so it's 18 persons per lot. So the 18-person limitation is actually for both of the properties.
Okay.
Now, the other property has a 2-bedroom house on it.
That's right.
So, but the limitation is per lot.
Okay.
So the front house couldn't have.
14, because you.
They're requesting 12, a limit of 12.
Yes.
Is that correct?
The front house couldn't increase it.
It limits that to 6.
Is there something in the cooperative documents that addresses?
There is.
You know what I'm saying? There's 2 bedrooms in the front and there's 6 bedrooms in the back.
But you don't know for sure how many bedrooms that other house
How many-
has.
Was the 2-bedroom place restricted to 2 bedrooms? I mean, you know.
No, that is not a typical term in a co-op document to limit the number of bedrooms. These houses are on sewer.
No, I'm just saying, so they could.
Well, it is a limitation that would apply, again, to the lot. So,
Well,
what it would.
That means the other people would have to sign off, right?
Well, not necessarily. Just to sort of play it out a little bit, there's no ground cover available left, so they'd have to change the small house it is. But also, if they went to get a building permit, I think that's where they would run it. If to do an alteration to add bedrooms, that's where they would run into a problem.
All right.
But again, you don't know for sure how many bedrooms are in there.
In the other house?
we're going by the assessor record on the bedroom on that particular house.
Okay.
I see you smiling, which means that.
I've been in there.
Right.
Mr.
Mr.
Callahan?
Chairman?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Mr. Callahan, and I'll go right to you, sir.
Their management plan says always lock your door. Does that violate that provision we were just talking about, of living as a family unit? I'm sure that's a liability issue in this, because it's in the same paragraph as protect your valuables.
Yep.
So if they're locking individual doors, is that a family unit or a room?
My kids lock their doors.
All right. Hold on.
Again, it's in a traditional house, you could lock the door to your bedroom. So it's, again, we're not.
Parsing this that far.
There would need to be other factors.
Right. I think that the what you're talking about is you have common bathrooms, you have common sanitation facilities, you have common cooking facilities, and you have common living areas. The fact that someone might have some private space doesn't make it not a communal living area. I think if we started saying each room has its own bathroom and each room has its own hot plate and kitchen, that's where you run into the not a cohesive dwelling unit. And we're happy to take conditions that reflect what's already in the bylaw, but as clarification, that there would not be additional kitchens and there would not be, those kind of things.
John?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not really sitting really well with me. And the reasons why, we are in a residential area. I see Linda's point, and I agree with them. When you have the special permit and you have these restrictions, I think it does protect a lot of the neighbors, whereas if you just load the people in there, you have no control of it. Mm-hmm. I understand that. However, 1,000 feet, it is a lot. But I look at it, if each house is 75 or 100 feet in the frontage, 10 houses down, somebody else can put another one of these. And I'm just afraid that it's going to set a precedent for a few of these houses. And I can tell you, for one, I wouldn't be thrilled if a dormitory housing was right next door to my house.
Yeah.
And then parking, we know that you're not going to have off-street parking, but it filters into it.
Right.
And no matter what restrictions there are, even if it's a special permit that we can review, we're already granting it, and I think it sets a bad precedent for the future and of the neighborhood.
John, I appreciate that, but I do want to remind you, this is just a residential use. It's not a, out of character commercial use. And frankly, this is already happening there.
Mhm.
Just nobody has permits for
I
it.
agree. I said there. I
And
agree
not
with
just
Linda.
there. I don't mean this
Sometimes the
neighborhood. It's happening
restrictions
all over the place.
Yeah, sometimes the
Business-
restrictions are good. What about building permits and things like that when you change it to dormitory housing? Does the alarms and sprinkler systems, anything like that, how does that affect that? Or is there no alteration to the building?
Well, it's not a dorm. There's a management plan, but it's not a dorm. But no, I don't believe there's any code issues that come into play. It's just a dwelling. It's not a commercial use. It's not being rented out to the public or something like that. But I think what you'd find if you walked around this neighborhood, or frankly a lot of other neighborhoods, is there's a lot of second dwellings that are rented out to businesses, that are rented out to 6 kids coming for the summer. And that is just a very common occurrence on Nantucket. That's how we go from 20,000 people to 60,000 people. And what we're trying to do here is do the right thing by saying, okay, this is an appropriately sized house for a certain number of people, and we're going to put a management plan in place to make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on the neighborhood with some kind of bad, character, and that if that happens, the planning board can not only limit but also revoke the permit.
I understand.
And that is the risk that comes along with the permit being granted.
And there's no opposition from the zoning enforcer or the health department as far as having unrelated family members outside of 3 inside of a single-family residence? Do you know any restriction with that?
Well, no. And a restriction like that would be unenforceable. What we talked about what I just talked about is you cannot discriminate to, households living together as one unit. Okay? And so I think there's some confusion. I'm hearing confusion on the part of the board that this is part of residential uses. It's grouped that way in the zoning bylaw. It's not a commercial use. It's not a dormitory. A dormitory is a totally separate building code and use requirement. This must remain a single-family house. It's subject to a plan of management that is to keep it that way. So we're getting a little off here.
The definition of family under the federal guidelines is not mother, father, son.
I understand.
The definition of family includes all
But-
kinds of people related by blood or not.
But are we talking family when they're individually renting out to employees? Then I think we're getting away from your terminology for family.
Well, again, from a zoning point of view and a building point of view, it's about a dwelling unit. Is whether or not the facility is operating as a single dwelling unit, not whether or not they're operating as a family. Certainly you could have 5 or 6 roommates rent this place. None of them are related. They all are using it. They're operating as a household, as a dwelling unit, even though none of them are related, and that doesn't need a permit.
What's going on all over the place?
I know what's going on all over the place,
Yeah.
and I think I would feel more comfortable knowing that there were restrictions on it. However, obviously the neighborhood is against it because they think that it's going to set a precedent for other houses 1,000 feet down the road. Somebody else is going to sell and make it into a dormitory, another 1,000 feet, any way you slice it.
Well, 1,000 feet in this case, because we looked at it, is the airport. 1,000 feet the other direction is the Nantucket Inn, and it keeps going that direction. Another 1,000 feet the other way is way down towards Monahasset Boulevard.
That's correct.
Has no bearing on this neighborhood. Another 1,000 feet going west is into Pulackiville. So
Well, how does
there's no
that?
1,000 square. There's no 1,000 feet in this neighborhood that keeps it in the neighborhood. The minute you go 1,000 feet in this area, you're outside of this neighborhood entirely. So for the fact that another one would be in this neighborhood is impossible.
So it sounds like it's pretty much a guarantee this would be the one and only in the entire neighborhood.
I think it's one of the only 6-bedroom houses in the whole neighborhood too.
Well, for now.
It may be the only 6-bedroom house.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
The only legally permitted 6-bedroom house.
Yeah, I thought my house was big. That's big.
All right, we're also kind of in public hearing phase as well,
Yeah.
too, so I don't want to I'd like to hear from some more people if they're there, so.
No, I just
Yeah,
have
go
a
ahead.
question.
Go ahead, please.
Separate, well, it's not separate, but an addition. Steve, can we add a condition to limit this to this entity?
Yeah, that's actually a proposed condition, that the
So that-
permit would only run with Great Harbor.
This is the thing, and this is like, right now, smoking hot. Everybody's all, but this isn't going to be permanent. Okay, this property's probably going to be sold at some point. Somebody already said that. If we keep it with GHYC, it can't just linger on into next year. It might be not an entity with such high qualifications, let's just say, or potential good neighborly site inspections.
I think that's exactly right.
And that will add a little bit more
If
to
they,
this.
Yeah, if they wanted to sell this property to a different business that would use it for its own employees, that would require approval of the planning
And they
board
can't,
as proposed.
and just the word dormitory housing, they can't have dormitory housing in in a residential neighborhood legally. So this is a separate issue, a separate application, a separate permit process that allows us in a residential neighborhood, but you can't have a dormitory housing there.
Right.
So that's not going to happen in your neighborhood, no matter what. So.
Right, neighborhood employee housing is different than dormitory housing.
Correct. So I just want them to know that, because that word dormitory gets thrown around a little bit. It's not, and it has a definition separate from this. So, tightening it up a little bit with just them, I think is good. This has a date. I'm sure that we're ending this in September or October. Something is, as far as the housing, that people aren't going to be here till like the end of December. So how are we? Is there going to be some kind of date where the people are moving out, or a certain number of them, or something to that effect, or is this just going to run through?
Well,
I'm just asking.
The club maybe has a 5 or 6 month main season, but I don't know that they do have year-round employees.
Yeah, so it's just not to exceed. Okay.
Right, there are maintenance people and management people who are here year-round. So I don't know that we want to kick people out.
No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying, it'd be like a restaurant having the time of year, when it's going to close, that kind of thing. I didn't know if there was going to be a date where.
No, I think it's pretty reliable that there wouldn't be 12 occupants at a maximum year-round, that you would have, most or all of them not there, but most likely at least someone would be there year-round, just based on the fact that they have some year-round employees, and this is a desirable housing unit.
Okay. So, anyone else in the audience wishing to comment on this? Hi.
Hi, Joe Gambroni, 21 Daffodil Lane. I just wanted to say, John, I agree with you. I think it's a scary precedent that we're saying, okay, and with the wordsmiths here, and talking about definition of families, and it's not just the mother, and it's not just the father. Come on, we know what's going on. We know what's happening here, okay? The Dugans, like many families, are scared that their values in their homes are plummeting with Richmond Great Point building on the back side of them. He's going to fire sale that house to the Harbor Yacht Club, and they're going to turn it into a dormitory housing. And say it or not, but I really believe that is what we're going to see here. We're going to see, I don't know how you're going to manage it or how you're going to go and check up on it. The doors are going to be locked. I don't know the ins and outs of dormitory versus, I don't know what the word was, neighborhood, employee housing, but it doesn't set well with us either, John. Thank you.
I guess what I would say is it's definitely not a fire sale, and that'll be a public record eventually when the sale closes. If anything, this is going to add value to the neighborhood by cleaning up what is currently not, frankly, there's a lot of residential uses that are worse than this because they've got broken down cars and illegal basement apartments and all kinds of stuff. This is going to be a highly regulated, appropriately sized, residential dwelling unit. And if it's not, you'll be they'll be in here in 15 minutes saying, okay, cut back the number of people, cut back this, cut back that, restrict them more, and that'll be the risk my client will have to run.
Anyone else wishing to comment on this?
Mr.
Mr. Chairman. Howard Bardsley, 23B Evergreen Way. Mr. Cohen, how are they going to regulate guests in this building? Are they going to be able to have guests?
Well, not. There's only 12 people. There's only 12 occupants allowed. So does that mean they can't have friends over? No. I think it's the way you have any kind of residence. People are allowed to have guests, but not extra occupants, and those are different.
But they can have other people in there as guests, in addition to the 12.
No, let him answer.
Just like anybody could have. I mean, it's not. I don't know. It's not the kind of thing where there's a gate at the front door and you can only get in with, I mean, it's a residence.
Absolutely. I've rented 2 houses over 20 years. I have much experience with people and renters, and I've been out there at 1 o'clock in the morning kicking people off the roof with the police. There's many things I've done. Now, this building has a full-size basement. Have you been in the basement?
I have not, but I understand it's got a.
It is huge.
About 18.
It has a 10-foot overhead.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people you could put in that basement on air mattresses.
It's unfinished, right?
It is unfinished, but you still can put people down there, and they do that all the time, as well as anybody knows around here when they pack people in.
Sure.
If no one's going down there and checking on this with some authority to kick people out, you're going to have problems.
Well, I guess what I would say is, and Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get into a back and forth, but
and I thank you. I appreciate you not doing that. But
if there's an abuse where there's dozens of people staying in this facility, that would become readily apparent, and you should complain to the zoning officer and the planning board. Any permit to finish that space would be regulated by this permit, and any, but what you're talking about also is something that could happen at any of these houses, and frankly,
I didn't say it couldn't.
It could happen now.
But it's going to happen with you.
Me. Gentlemen, through the chair, please.
Yes, sir.
Through the chair.
If the Dugans want to have a dozen, or I don't know how many air mattresses you can get in 1,800 square feet, but a whole bunch, they could do that now. It's illegal. It's in violation of all kinds of codes, but it's not something that could be. It has nothing to do with whether you have this permit or not. So again, does Great Harbor Yacht Club want to be associated with having 50 people sleeping on air mattresses? I don't think so.
How are you going to know, sir?
Sure.
Mr. Crease.
Stephen Crease, General Manager of Great Harbor Yacht Club. We do random inspections, and I believe in the documentation that we submitted, it also says that we, management, including myself, have the ability to visit bedrooms of employees that are employed by us. We're very strict, and we generally, I've 7 seasons in Great Harbor Yacht Club in Nantucket, and I don't believe that I've had any issues that have violated any rules where we've either leased space from people on the island or space that we own. I run a 40-room inn called the Tuckernuck on site at Great Harbor Yacht Club, and trust me, I've actually escorted somebody to the airport and sent them home if they've been in any slight violation. And it's clearly written in the handbook and all the policies. So I have the right as a general manager, as do some of my other directors, to visit houses we rent and properties that we own and inspect.
Hold on. Let him go ahead.
Another item on this building, it has a 3rd floor, which you can stand up in. What I'm saying is the building has much more potential than 6 people, to put more than 6 people in there with very little difficulty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that could happen now.
Yeah, it can happen now. No control, nobody to come complain to, no zoning enforcement officer, no planning board conditions, no reopening of permits, nothing. If someone in the regular public were to buy this as opposed to an employer who's got a reputation to uphold, chaos can reign out there, and the only person you can go to is the health department, and hopefully they come out sometime and shut them down. Ask Richard Ray. He had to do that millions and millions of times. Without the teeth of the planning board, without the teeth of a special permit, without the zoning enforcement officer, without being able to reopen a permit. It's a big house. It's got 6 bedrooms. It can legally have probably 12 occupants now, let alone a free-for-all in there, and we all live next to free-for-alls. This is a much better situation with this particular employer, this particular owner, which is why if it is not the Great Harbor Yacht Club, if they want to sell it to someone else, the permit runs with the land, generally speaking. This permit is running with the owner, which we don't do. Maybe 1 in 100 do we run with an employer, with an owner. And to protect the neighborhood, we're going to make it so it runs with this particular owner. If he wants to sell it to somebody else or change the use, it's coming back in here. It's going back out to public comment. And maybe there's more of a disreputable person wanting to buy it or doesn't have the kind of controls that the yacht club has. And then we have that discussion all over again. And maybe it doesn't happen and maybe the permit's revoked. So there's a lot more control right now than if Dwayne and Liliana sold it to some random person who then crammed the thing in the attic and crammed it in the basement and crammed it in every single square inch, and we don't have anything to say about it. So if a large house, you don't see too many 6-bedroom houses in year-round neighborhoods, let's face it, it's got a certain occupancy, and I think this is a much better scenario with this particular employer than some random person coming in and cramming all of his employees in there.
Okay. Did you have something, Leslie?
So, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of clarifications. Whether the board issues a permit or not doesn't really set a precedent for future applications. Right. I mean, every application is considered on its merits on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. The bylaw specifies that you can't have more than one of these within a 1,000-foot radius, so that's all the way around. But the board, if a lot of these applications came in the same neighborhood but outside of the radius, you're not required to grant the special permit for everyone. Right. So that's one thing. I'm unaware of any issues with any neighborhood employee housing special permit that's been granted by the planning board. I'm unaware of, any zoning complaints related to those. You have, with all of them, put in fairly strict regulations in their management plan, and most of them are run by companies like Great Harbor Yacht Club or Nantucket Island Resorts or places that have employment agreements that further regulate the special permit. So in this case, Great Harbor Yacht Club has set a really good example with their employee housing on the site. The planning board also has a dormitory management plan for that. We have not received any complaints ever. So we would like to recommend approval with the following conditions, if the board's inclined. That no more than 12 occupants be permitted in the structure. No more than maybe 4 vehicles. You all, I don't think, talked about the exact number. That you would revisit the application or the special permit in 1 year. That NRTA passes be granted or be provided to the employees. That no on-street parking be allowed by either the occupants or their guests. That the special permit is granted specific to Great Harbor Yacht Club. It's not a special permit that runs with the land. That some of the points, which we'd have to specify those from the Great Harbor Yacht Club housing policies, be incorporated and referenced in the decision. That you could reopen the special permit at any time based on complaints received. And maybe that you consider that any future finished space, like in the basement or changes to rooms that change their purpose or their use, be reviewed by the board prior to the issuance of a building permit.
That's a good one.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. And that we're going to check 1,000-foot radius prior to.
We can check that, but I'm confident that the closest NEHOD is on Wampanoag Way. Yeah. 'Cause you all haven't granted that many, and that's in a commercial zone.
Okay.
That's the thing, we can count on like one hand.
So,
all right.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I think all of those are fine with my client. They wouldn't mind 5 parking spaces, but other than that, everything sounded appropriate.
All right, so hang on. We're still in the public hearing phase. Go ahead. Hi.
Hi, good evening. Alexandra Tyther-Jalen, 25B Daffodil. I'd be grateful if Mr. Cohen could clarify where he thinks that parking's going.
Where?
Yeah.
Well, in the southern portion of the lot, there's 2 spaces there, and then there's up where the boats are.
So that would be 5 cars in those spaces.
Well, 2 and 3.
So that that's 5 within the lot. I want to be clear because
as opposed to on the street.
yeah, because at the moment you're suggesting, excuse me, sorry, Mr. Rector, that the lot has enough space for 3+ cars. At the moment, you can even see it on the diagram. The cars are on the street. Yes, parking has been a real issue, and I would just like to be really clear where you foresee the cars for this lot going, because...
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just respond, I think what we would anticipate, and of course, that could be subject to approval of a landscaping or parking plan. There could be, it looks like there's already enough space for 2 parking spaces on the southern portion and 3 more spaces at the northern portion. And if the board wanted to include a condition for screening of that, that would be an entirely acceptable condition. My client wants to have a nice-looking facility. So if that was helpful, it would be fine, too.
But no car. We don't even know if those cars are related to that lot.
It's
they are, but I don't know if any of them are registered. That's it.
And where they aren't.
From here on out, no cars associated with this lot are to be
Right.
parked on that street. That's part of the conditions.
Right.
If you find that they've parked a car on the street that's associated with this lot, you make the phone call to the office.
And that would be one of our next questions. That's an immediate. We see one car, we phone up, and if it's 10 o'clock at night, are we going to get someone to move them, or?
So what we would propose is, and I think this is probably already in there, is that there would be a requirement for there to be a manager on duty that would have a cell phone, and that would be provided both to the planning board and to the neighbors, and that there would be someone that could be contacted immediately. But in terms of enforcement, I think there are essentially 2 ways that this is enforced. One is that the zoning enforcement officer could fine Great Harbor Yacht Club, and the second one, and the second, the management obviously is going to want to take care of it. But I mean, in terms of governmental enforcement, it could result in fines, or at the next planning board meeting, we could be called in and told, okay, you are not keeping up with your permit, and this is what we're going to do about it. So I don't know that the car gets towed right away by the government, but certainly the management wants to look responsive by being in compliance, and it's going to be out there saying, hey, move the car. It can't be there because we don't want a problem. Right?
We have a problem at the moment. This is a private road, and the idea of enforcement by towing is something as the HOA we do have to try and address. But I don't think suggesting that the zoning board would tow cars on a private road is necessarily the answer.
No, it wouldn't. Yeah.
But let's be reasonable here. Let's be reasonable. If there's somebody leaves a car there overnight associated with this property, the next morning you call and the management takes care of it. But let's not be ridiculous.
No, but if we are talking about having parties, that's
they're not
the fear of
allowed
the
to have
neighborhood.
parties.
Well,
and again, you make the phone call to the number that they're going to provide for you.
I don't know.
Excuse me.
I don't know if we're regulating fun,
Excuse me.
but
Comments through the chair, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I think
Cohen.
that there's 3 ways this gets enforced. 2 of them are governmental, either through fines or through reopening the hearing. But the most important and most immediate one is through management, and the management is going to want to A, avoid problems, and be as responsive as possible to avoid the fines and the revocation or alteration of the permit. So where in most cases you have no ability to get anybody to do anything, here you have a party that is readily available, readily accessible, I should say, and highly incentivized to solve the problem.
Mr. Rector, you've seen our letter. Our neighborhood has concerns. We've listened to the conditions, which I personally think do put us in the right direction, but there's still this issue of single-family residence. I understand you can't discriminate between whether it's 5 people related or not, but to be realistic, they are all going to be in there with locked doors, and I don't think that's a family.
Well, I guess what I'd say is family is not actually the legal thing, but if the planning board wants to change the zoning so that neighborhood employee housing is not allowed in the R20 district, that is something the planning board could or anybody else could suggest, but at the moment it's an allowed use. I've got no further comment. I'll leave it at that point. I don't believe that having, a
12 occupants with locked bedrooms constitutes a single residence use.
We can't get into the locked door or not locked door. That's outside our jurisdiction. I have locks on every door in my house. We cannot get into the locked door thing. You're going to lock a bathroom. You're going to lock a bedroom.
Okay.
You can't do it.
All right. Let's not go too much further.
But they can have 12 occupants plus at the moment with no control.
Is anyone else wishing to comment on this? Anything else from the board? Okay.
Can I get a point of information?
Yes, sir.
Actually, two.
Yes, sir.
They relate to one. One is the conditions that resident proposed for as approval.
Okay.
I wanted to confirm that that includes that, as opposed to the language in the management plan now, that this is for Great Harbor Yacht Club employees only.
Yes.
And then we discussed, and Mr. Cohen provided reasons why the offsite housing policies could not be included verbatim, which I understand, I don't disagree with. But there are some points in there, for instance, quiet hours, which get into great detail, what I think would be beneficial for the neighborhood and anyone who has a neighborhood like this in the future who gets one of these non-dormitory housing, employee housing residences. And that's titled quiet hours. And I wanted, as a point of information, to confirm that that is one that we wouldn't be including from the policies. And then, as another point of information, I wanted to know if the applicant, basically it says quiet hours will be in effect daily from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. You're not going to be making noises or distractions which would interfere with people's residents' personal schedules or sleep schedules. So the point of information, the question is of the applicant, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if I can do this or not, but I'll go for it, tell me no, is whether as a condition of the approval, as opposed to 10 p.m. to 8 p.m., or 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., given the nature of the residential context, if they would concede or go with a 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. for your quiet hours. Because we have a right, as I understand, under this particular type of application, to make changes above and beyond the noise bylaw. Is that correct, Leslie?
Not advisable.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, can I try to address that a little bit?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, let Mr. Cohen address it first.
So I appreciate your concern, but I do want to point out what we're talking about there is trying to regulate or trying to control how the family within the dwelling interacts in a way that we, the owner, can, but necessarily the planning board, A, has no business to regulate, and B, probably has no jurisdiction to regulate, and C, probably has no way to enforce, because you're talking about something that nobody can tell about what's going on inside, like disturbing each other. The planning board in the neighborhood should be worried about noises audible beyond the property line, which are already fairly, clearly regulated by the noise bylaw. So whether or not, Paul is bothering John at 10 o'clock at night, I don't know that that gets into the planning board jurisdiction, but certainly if Paul and John are bothering their neighbors, that's a noise bylaw issue.
Yeah, I'm not, Mr. Chairman, may I
Yeah.
clarify my point? I'm not suggesting that the planning board would get involved in enforcing this or policing it. The fact that these types of matters probably fall through the cracks where neighbors will naturally call the police versus the zoning officer to lodge a complaint about a particular property, then that complaint would come up in the review process. That's a whole separate topic, as is the interior noise. However, there's absolutely no question that if it has to be quiet from 9 a.m. to 9, or from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. inside the house, it's going to be quiet outside the house. And that does affect the neighbors, which is why I brought it up.
I'm really going to get nuts over here.
Yeah.
And
just hold on.
I mean, I don't know the hours
what do we do with that?
have the hours that you're suggesting are reasonable, but I think it's a very slippery slope for the planning board to get that deep in the house.
I defer to
That's
staff
not part of
and
the special
clarify what we have the right to do or not to.
Okay, so,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, we did have a conversation today about the rational nexus and how the board can ask for certain conditions that are connected to the relief that's being requested. So we had that conversation. But I think in this particular case, the quiet hours, which they have in their, I guess, employment agreement, 10 p.m., that's consistent with the noise bylaw, which is no loud noises after 10 p.m. And when the planning board reviews whatever project it is on an annual basis, we do consult with the police to see if there have been noise complaints, and we gather those to see what the issue is and if that's something that we need to address.
Yeah. The other thing is that when you start having highly specialized things like that, it becomes essentially impossible for the zoning officer or the police or whoever to keep track of one by one by one by one. And this has actually been a big complaint that there has been a attempt by the planning staff and the zoning staff and the police to regularize these permits so that everybody is basically operating on the same. And I think trying to go backwards on that, and especially when you're talking about interior noise, is not necessarily a good governmental action, although I understand your point. You're saying if it's quiet inside, then it's even quieter outside.
So we do by right or not, I just want to be clear, we do or we do not have a right in this particular instance to request some controls on noise above and beyond the town bylaw.
Inside a house.
Not inside a house.
Just-
I'm not talking about inside a house.
Will you let staff answer, please? Thank you.
If there was some direct correlation between what was being proposed, like for instance, if it was a commercial business and they wanted to have an outdoor patio open until a certain time, you could say that's outside, that will clearly be audible, and we think that it should be earlier. I think this is a different type of situation. I mean, it's a house, it's a single-family dwelling, which we've already talked about, and regulating, quiet hours inside is something that may be beyond what the planning board should be involved with.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Is there anything else? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment? Board members?
I'm very alarmed at this discussion about telling people when they can be quiet in their own bedroom. I've never had that discussion. I've been involved with zoning since 1983. The ZBA tried to make inroads into what you can and can't do in your own bedroom, and it was blown out of the water. So I'm not happy with this discussion. Second off, when it's 10:01 and I had the old embassy in the Badlands going all the time, at 10:01, police, they come, shut it down. I got a house behind me now in the Badlands that tends to have these wacky parties until 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm on the phone, cops come out. They start up again after the cop leaves, I'm back on the phone, the cops come out. And eventually they issue a citation. So at 10:01, I don't suggest you wait if there's parties going on in this house, which I doubt they're going to be able to get away with. Then you have cause for a complaint and you call the cops. And rather than waiting for the zoning enforcement officer or the management to get back to them in the morning with a complaint, you call the police at 10:01. They're on the site. And they stop it.
Linda, I get, just to sort of piggyback that.
I've had to do it for years.
What you have in this situation is not just someone who's going to have the police called on them, but someone who's probably going to lose their job for having the police called. So there's a huge incentive not to cause problems in the neighborhood for the employees and for the employer, because if there's a call at 10 o'clock and another call at 10:30, in the morning, Stephen's driving them to the boat. So
I think we get it. I think we get it. I don't think there's need to elaborate much further. Board members, is there anything else?
No.
Not hearing anything else from the public as well, too? Yes. Okay. It's the pleasure of the board.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I hear a second? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve with all of those conditions, as well as what staff thinks should come out of the management plan that would be relevant to something that the planning board would incorporate, unless you want to attach the management plan as part of as an addendum. Many times we have attached management plans as addendums to decisions.
Well, the management plan is attached. It's the employee guide that I'm.
The employee guide, how do you want to deal with that? Take things out of it that you think should come out and put it in the decision? Okay.
Yes.
Yep, I think Andrew and
Yeah.
Leslie have got the
So you can
experience
incorporate
for it.
some of that stuff? Not the 9 to 9, 10 to 8, no disturb the guy in the room next
All
to
right,
you.
we get it. We get it. We get it. We get it. Let's be clear on what we want. And
One more thing on condition 11, Leslie.
yes,
Shall discourage, you replace that word with, shall eliminate.
Yeah, no off-street parking.
Yeah.
thank you.
No on-street parking.
Well, I guess,
Something to make it that way.
No on-street parking related to this property.
Right.
All right. Is there anything else for discussion purposes in this phase? Are we all clear upon what we're voting on at this point?
I think I'll second.
It was made and seconded,
It did.
but we can do it again.
No, I'm just.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, let that reflect. That's a 4-1 vote by this board. Mr. Trudell opposed. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I was in the teeter-totter.
All right. Next thing before us at this point
Yeah.
is a sketch plan from Nautilus Real Estate Holdings, LLC, 63 Fairgrounds Road.
Good evening, Don Bracken of Bracken
Good
Engineering.
evening, Mr. Bracken.
Representing the applicants.
Shh. Let him fin-
check what property it is. I know, but who owns it?
Do you need a second to figure out if you need a recusal?
Yeah. John, who owns it?
Nautilus Real Estate Holdings.
Who is that?
Steve Bola.
Okay.
That guy right there.
Thank you.
There you go, okay? That's okay.
Okay.
Is it near the property that you have? That's
There you
not
go.
helping.
Yeah.
All right.
This is Davis. This is Linda. This is Davis property. It was a brick building. It's like a brick ranch. So, Old South Road is that way. This is Surfside Road.
I mean, this is really just a sketch plan at this point, so if you're really not sure, it's probably best to...
No, I'm just trying to figure out the house.
Yeah, there's a. You see,
What
there's
is the road right to the right, up and north of it?
That's not a road. There are two
Is that
lots
parking?
there. There are two lots. Yeah.
Okay. We're not, housing trust is not for me.
Okay. All right. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank
Bracken.
you.
Back up.
The property consists of two lots. One lot was approved by A&R last January. The total combined area of both lots is 40,000 square feet. The current owners would like to subdivide in order to get a third lot. There's not enough frontage on Fairgrounds Road to get a third lot through the A&R process. So we looked at a few different options of proposing a roadway to establish frontage for the third lot. The first sketch that we submitted that's up on the screen shows the three conforming lots meeting shape, factor, and area in a 40-foot wide roadway with a hammerhead, substantially meeting the subdivision rules and regulations. One waiver that would be required for this road would be a rounding at the intersection. We show one on the east side of the road. But as you can see, the actual roadway is significantly further from the edge of the right-of-way, so even a rounding in that location really wouldn't be required in order to build a road, the road surface and radiuses that comply with the regulations. So we wanted to show you what it would look like and to demonstrate mathematically that there is a great possibility for three lots. There is an existing house outlined in this area. Under this scenario, the existing house, in order to meet the setbacks, would have to be relocated, which is still possible, but we don't think it's the best use of the land in order to get the third lot. Holly, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this slide shows a reduced roadway width of 20 feet, a partial cul-de-sac to get the frontage for the rear lot. In this case, we wouldn't have to relocate that structure. Lot A would take its access from Fairgrounds Road. There's an existing curb cut already in this location, and there's another curb cut already in this location. It's a loop driveway, which we can see on the third sheet. This also allows larger lot area for this back lot. And if you could go to the third sheet, this shows what a potential development on the site would look like, along with the existing conditions. Again, here's the driveway area that would be utilized by this A&R lot, and the new roadway for the other two lots would be about in the same location as the existing driveway. What we'd like tonight, if possible, is to get some feedback from the planning board if they're interested in contemplating the waivers that would be required to build this, in some direction on roadway standards that you may be looking at, if you are willing to consider these waivers. The site has municipal water supply and sewer. It's not in a MESA area or flood zone. So there are very few restrictions besides zoning for constructing on this property.
Questions? Are all three lots buildable out to the maximum potential, or are you putting restrictions on any of them?
We haven't talked about any restrictions, but that's, again, some feedback we'd like to get. If part of granting the waivers, this board feels that there should be restrictions, then we certainly can discuss it.
I think the only reason I'm asking that is it just deals more with the roadway than anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I know. Go ahead.
John, there's no frontage on Gray Avenue for that back lot?
No.
No. Gray Avenue.
No, there's a lot behind it. I think
Oh,
McDonald's is behind
that's-
it. McDonald's old lot is behind it. The two lots behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah,
between.
there are two lots
all right,
behind it,
all right.
that do front on
Those aren't
Gray.
great.
All right, okay.
Number 4, Gray Avenue.
Yes, Leslie, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so, the board has been pretty flexible with these smaller roadways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But, if they're going to be talking about a primary dwelling, a secondary dwelling, and a tertiary dwelling, then I don't know about the reduced roadway. I mean, what are we proposing for the traveled surface?
I believe the intent, what's drawn here is a 12-foot wide, more of a common driveway. But we could, we could go up to 16-foot wide. I think the only real potential for a secondary dwelling would be on the larger lot in the back.
It's only
So-
25% ground cover here.
Right. So there's not much space. I think that's about a 2,200 square foot house that's on there right now. So-
Would the house in the back be in compliance? I know you'd have to move for setback, but would be in compliance for ground cover with the 40-foot layout?
Yes, it would. Yep.
I don't even think
So
you have to.
to me, it's like that extra area you get, how many square feet? It's all jammed in the,
Let's see.
does it like, goes from 12 to 16 or something?
Yes.
Yeah, 12,652
So you
to
get 1,000 square feet more
60,500.
buildable?
No, it's only 25% ground cover no matter what happens.
And it's 25% of what?
And
Well,
Area.
if it's going up 4,000,
mhm,
25% of 4,000 is 1,000.
right.
Huh, which is a cottage back there, probably.
So the back lot will
Oh.
have, will be able to have two houses, no problem. Meet ground cover.
What did we do with Kara's?
So you had lots on both sides.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, you may recall just last week, we had a really lengthy discussion about the project on Hetikva.
Hetikva.
I'm not sure what the name of that is,
That's
but,
okay, but anyways.
and that's in R10. Those were 3 lots with 3 dwellings, and they required a lot of parking, and the roadway had to be expanded, and I just think that that's something that we should think through here.
Right.
Is that going to be proposed, or is it going to be 2 dwellings in the front and 2 or 3 in the back? I mean, that's important, because it's all allowed by right. There's no.
But they still have to provide the parking.
Mr. Chairman, I think it is, as shown, those look like 2 single-family houses
Yep.
with sort of a reasonable parking area in front. But this is R10, can be duplexes. So again, if the houses are set back and duplexes are built, then essentially the front yard becomes parking, which is something we have tried to get away from here, if that's the case. So, I mean, the way you've represented it doesn't mean that it's going to be built out that way.
Right.
So,
But every house on Fairgrounds has parking on that side because of the size of the lots, has parking in the front. They always have. That's just the way they got developed.
But that doesn't mean it can't be changed.
Oh, so they become odd in their neighborhood. Okay.
Well, I think parking for single-family houses, again, versus parking for duplexes, we've already had bad examples where the front yards have been turned into parking. So I think, you don't, if we didn't allow duplexes on those front two lots, for example, that's a possibility, maybe.
I'll have to discuss that with the owners, but
Or if it's single families with accessory apartment or smaller, it's limited to something like that, then that's not as much of a concern. Or the houses could go, at least the house on the road could go forward and the parking could go behind.
Every single house on that side has parking in the front. Every single house.
Thinking of, I've never seen
Everyone.
us do it, is that without the extra ground cover that you're getting, I'd like to see the ground cover be restricted to what you may have gotten with the 40-foot layout and go to the 20-foot layout.
We're taking his rights away from him.
Well, then go to the 40-foot layout.
We haven't approved one of those in
I'm just
a long
saying, that would
time.
be
We
something
don't
to
want a
consider.
40-foot layout.
I'm just saying,
That's okay.
it's
He
an
has
idea.
he has a right to have an opinion.
Go ahead.
Last
Mr.
time I
Chairman.
checked. Just check.
Mr. Chairman, if you
Good.
look at the locus map in the
Not
vicinity
reinventing
photo, I mean, you'll see that there are a lot of lots along this portion of Fairgrounds Road that have similar potential.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
So, again, it really needs to be thought through about, what's the future character of the area that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's different than every other lot on the street already.
But can I just comment the comment going down?
They have neighborhood contacts here.
We're done with the other previous applications. This is more normal. Doesn't require the same thing.
Okay, all right.
Okay, normal meaning, you know what I'm saying. This is very common now. Okay, the small layout Joe started a while ago at Paul Jones or whatever that little road on the cliff. I'm not going off the rails on that.
Ken? Yeah.
I think with Linda, with Leslie saying this, and we said this the other night, there is a lot of development potential in the Hooper Farm area that's been R10 since '72. It isn't, and this was a willy-nilly, the old way. I think my wife likes the house here because she can look out the window here, and they just plonk and put the house down, and that's it. And that's the way people built things back then. Now these lots have a lot of A&R potential, but they're also, as Leslie's saying, the little ways. And how I kind of look at the ways is it's just a driveway. You know what I mean? Even though they're getting frontage from it, Joe, I'm not saying that they don't get a benefit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the look.
I'm not saying anything.
No. But you look at the benefit side, and I'm not saying that I'm not. I'm talking strictly about what Leslie's saying. What do we want the road to look like? Is there going to be a zillion place, ways and places and all that? Well, maybe that will look okay if it's done right. You know what I'm saying? Where it's not. I mean, the Waverly place doesn't look bad. There was a lot of land back there that was usable but not subdividable A&R. Okay. I don't really have a problem with these when they're done right. When they look, and then when the trees grow in and it becomes like Shady Lane. Does anyone ever even think about it? No. You just drive right by it now, don't you? That's not that old. Okay? I just drove down there the other day. That's the only reason I thought of it. I don't know why I did. I mean, it's sort of the way we are. All these little roads came off of Hooper Farm at one time. So I don't think they're trying to shoehorn here.
I agree with you.
I think they're conforming lots. I think we should restrict, though, a little bit I'm not saying that, Joe, and that's where I'm leaning on your side, on the benefit side. But for them to get 3 lots out of this, doing the little road, I don't have a problem with that part of it as much as I do,
What's going to be on the lot.
Right, that's right. That's how I'm looking at it. So that's just my opinion. But this isn't the first one of these. It's not going to be the last.
Right.
And it's not free either.
Do you need to talk to your client and come back in January?
Yes, we can do
Okay.
that, yeah.
Let me just finish this.
Well, anyone else?
Don, is that
No, I think
the old outlet is going away, right?
Yes.
Obviously. So the second lot, I would call it the second potential A&R lot side. That you're going to use. I mean, that's important. We're not increasing the curb cuts, technically.
Correct.
It's not going to look different in that regard. Asking for a special permit.
We would expect that restriction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think what I can walk away with tonight, which is good, and then come back again, is the fact that you're willing to entertain the narrower road, which is our first concern, and then you want us to put a lot of thought in what the ultimate development is going to go on and what restrictions could
And you don't
possibly
have
be
to. I
placed
mean,
on it.
Andrew brought up something I think is important too. You don't have to put the house on the back of the parking area.
No,
You could
correct.
kind of jiggle that, make the parking in the back. There's a lot. I'm just saying.
All right, let's not speculate here.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
He's-
okay.
Okay.
All right.
True. That's true.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a fact-finding mission for Don, and I think he did a nice job to present a plan that shows 2 curb cuts that are already existing. We're just sliding one over. We're making, Nat raises a good point, we're making a access to the back lot. It almost looks like it's a driveway, so there's not a second curb cut. I think the big question is what's going to be proposed there, and you're going to find that out.
We'll find
So
out. We'll be
I
back.
think it's a good start.
Yep.
Thank you.
Leslie, anything else?
No, I'll just remind you, it's a sketch plan, so he'll have to come back with a full application at
Sure.
whatever meeting. It doesn't have to be continued to any date certain.
Right. Does that help a little bit, Mr.?
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we're almost there.
We are.
Brings us to a public hearing
Right.
phase at this point. I know Patty wanted. No, we just need to check in and make sure that Mr. Bracken has done his thing at this point. He's heard what we had to say. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean public hearing. I'm so sorry, public comment.
Public
It's-
comments.
The hour is late, and I'm sorry. I apologize.
He doesn't have a formal application yet.
Yeah, right.
And I apologize, I get sleepier and sleepier. I forget what it's like to sit in this room till 9 o'clock at night. It gets
With the
long.
Patriots on as well.
My name is Patty Roggery, and as you know, I'm here tonight for Richmond Great Point Development. We saw the need to come before you and possibly ask for your help. As you know, we have a number of applications pending currently, and within that context, just to kind of review just one particular point, which is that within that application process, we did go to a special town meeting. We did get public support. I think we've tossed that around a good deal here. We are working with you and with staff to make sure that our development is something that is conditioned, obviously, and that will use every opportunity to provide mitigation, whether it be for traffic or sewer or anything else. And we have a rather interesting, possibly puzzling is the word, incident that occurred during Mr. Vorse's presentation to the Board of Selectmen about a week ago. And we're a little confused, frankly, but at some level we felt like we want to continue to work with the Board of Selectmen. We don't want to escalate this in any respect, and kind of brainstormed. And I say we because Dave sat here as long as he could till he could get the last boat, and Phil actually came on island and was going to stay. This is very important to us. We want to make sure that we continue in the vein, in the venue that we've been working closely with the town and with the input that the town has provided. One of the stipulations of our MOA with the Board of Selectmen, just to give you the real gist of this, was to do a fiscal impact report, which we did, completed, turned into them in September, I believe. The MOA actually stops there. So we did, however, outreach to them and ask a number of occasions, both to them and to David Worth, who we met with a couple of times, and very productive times, to make sure that our consultant, John Connery, who's very well known and very well respected, if they had any comments about, what the report stated. We had a very difficult time of recent months to get them to pay attention, and now all of a sudden it seems to be coming up, except it's actually not posted on their agenda, so it's a little hard to grapple with. But we have noted, and we've finally shared, there's a body of comments currently from David Worth that seem to be rising quickly to the level of peer review, even though they weren't really authorized by the board. And David's a great guy, but he's not of the caliber in this particular area that John Connery would be. So basically, in the name of kind of maybe a way to clear this up, but possibly certainly to give the public the right information, we thought it would be useful to request of you to maybe work with your housing production plan consultant, who I know is very familiar with this subject area and with the island, to do a kind of executive peer review of John Connery's work, so that we can maybe put to rest any kind of concerns that might exist with respect to that. There is, timing is important to us here. As you know, we're going to be delayed probably just because of vacations to later in January, which might be fortuitous because it gives a little bit more time for this. But ultimately, we would like, to ask of you at our expense to have this done, to take our report, although it's not required of us, although the Board of Selectmen haven't asked us to do this, but since we're working closely with you within this project, we thought this was the correct venue to come before and see if we can't get some clarity and so that we're all comfortable at the end of the day that what we're doing is the best thing for the island, which has been our goal all along. And I will say, too, that this is obviously highly unusual. I mean, most projects don't even do a fiscal impact report, much less go to the sort of the lengths that we're going. And we are, very, very, we understand there's a lot of concern. We try to work with the neighbors. We've appreciated your sort of steady hands on all of this, and this is basically why I'm here tonight, is to ask if this would be something you'd consider.
Bullet pointed again. What do you want? Just forget all the other verbiage. What do you want us to do to support you?
Yeah, we would like you to maybe, and through the staff, because the housing production plan is so familiar already with the issues surrounding some of this, that was a place that we went to. But we would like, basically, we're requesting to do a quick executive peer review of the John Connery fiscal impact report that we
do that.
Well, I think the firm that we use for the housing production plan is RKG, who certainly is qualified to at least take a look at this and give some sort of an opinion letter, if this is something that the board wants to get some guidance on. Again, I want to caution you that some sort of conditions about school children is well outside what you can do.
Has everybody seen this thing from David Worth?
No, I did not.
No. All right, we need to get it back out again.
All right, so.
And then it was a fiasco last Wednesday. It was just
You need to check your email. I've asked Catherine to send
All
it
right,
to
hold
you
on.
several times. Have you received it? Okay. So
you might want to do it again then.
you all need to review it. If you have not reviewed your fiscal impact study, which was made available to you in September.
Yep.
You have to resend all that stuff.
That's our September.
That's it,
right.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So you all need to, I guess, read that first, understand the comments that came in from Mr. Worth. I believe it's unclear to me because in what he has presented, it says our, and it talks about, I don't know who it actually
Ken, you let him finish? Really, this is important.
represents. But there are some implications, and I have had many conversations about the facts that impact fees are not allowable in this state, and there's a discussion about school children, and I guess that's where the heart of this disagreement goes back and forth. But again, I don't know what you all are going to really have to do about that. You might want to know how many school children are there in order to consider playgrounds and recreational facilities, but you're not in any position to start limiting them.
No.
Well, good. I'm glad you all understand that, because I'm a little concerned with some of
I
it.
just understand where that's going, yeah.
So,
And our concern is basically, we have a lot of confidence in John Connery's numbers, and I think for planning purposes, whether they be, infrastructure or, school buildings, it's important to have the right numbers. So we're just asking that there's a reconfirmation of those numbers. We don't deny that David has comments and an opinion, but I think that's the level at which we're dealing. And that opinion can be challenged by our consultant, certainly, but we want to make sure there's another step, that the public has confidence in your decision on your conditions, and that there's not, any kind of, later squabbling about whether this, and we all live here. We know that happens when people don't get fully informed on what's going on. This is an important project. We want to feel good about our neighborhood, and we know you want to feel solid in your decision, so hence the request.
Go ahead.
Do whatever we need to do. If people haven't read it, we need to have it sent out again, just so we're more familiar with it again, particularly one from September. But if anybody has not watched Geno TV on the interview, what is it, 98, 99, something like that.
Anyways.
Rick Atherton did an interview a couple of days ago, and you all need to listen to his opinion about the planning board.
Well,
And it's on TV now.
Let's stick to what.
But it goes along with some of what happened last Wednesday. That's what I'm sticking to. Would you really need to watch the Board of Selectmen's meeting from last Wednesday?
All I'm saying is, as far as I'm concerned, if we can get these people to do it, it's on your tab. Let's do it. And if that's the question you're asking, let's
do whatever you need to do.
The
You need to look at this in the bigger picture.
how they got to this is the bigger problem.
Yeah.
That they're going to pay for RKG is like nothing compared to how we got to this crazy
I understand
procreation report stuff.
All right.
That's what it
And-
is.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Minorities
because
and everything
through
else.
you, though, I do.
Easy.
I do need to confirm that that Richmond would pay. I mean, it's probably somewhere around between $3,000 and $5,000 to do this kind of review.
If you made it conditional, like I said, Dave and I spoke about it, and we were on the same page, and we do need to talk to Phil, but I know he's very interested in making sure this is done in a way that's professional. So that's where we're going.
So, Mr. Chairman, we would treat this somewhat like the peer review with the traffic, except probably not, again, I don't think we need to do a complete, it's more of an opinion letter at this point. I don't think that we have the time, or I don't know if you all want, to hire a whole other person.
I mean, we would advocate not to, only because we don't want to raise this to a level of importance that it really doesn't own. So while we're trying our best to, balance the interests and the desires of the Board of Selectmen, let's face it, we have to work down the road with them in terms of their role as county commissioners and all the things that you propose. We want them to accept. This is important for all of us to be on the same page. So we want to do something that's more than symbolic, but certainly has some teeth. And we felt that David Worth's was an opinion, sort of review, and that kind of level of response from someone who is as familiar as this firm is with with this housing question. That you've got, this board has commissioned that firm to do the housing study and the housing production plan. We just thought that would be a good match to balance off David's concerns. Again, we're in a little bit of a sticky wicky, because if that's a real word, because we've never been asked to have Mr. Connery discuss this, but we are now going to have him come to speak to department heads. So that's being set up currently. So
Just after having watched that meeting, it became abundantly clear. I mean, granted, yes, people are entitled to their opinion. They can put their opinion into print. But this seemed to kind of take on a little bit of a life of its own as being a valid report, which I'm not even sure who authorized the bloody thing as I sat through and watched that meeting. And there was no one there who was able to say that in any way, shape, or form. So it kind of morphed from, hi, my opinion becomes a report for the town. And I think when you read this thing, what is more disturbing in there to me is, whereas Mr. Carney will have citations to it, there's no citations. So how we arrive at those figures that he's presenting forward that some of the Board of Selectmen are believing to adopt is making my head spin at that point. There, if you haven't seen the last Board of Selectmen meeting, go to time index 123, 1 hour 23 minutes, okay? Just let me do that as a favor to you. Because you need to watch it. There was a stage where the Board of Selectmen were going to take a vote to tell the planning board to hold this whole project aside so they could act on the fiscal impact report, which fortunately got put away at the end, but boy, that was 45 minutes worth of
Wasn't on the agenda either.
Yeah. So, and again, like they said, this didn't even appear on the agenda, and they did not even have the courtesy of talking to Richmond to say, here we are, to talk about it.
Right.
But as one member of this board, I would really like you to do it, because there was one thing that came up. Just let me finish. Can I finish? Can I finish? I guess I can't finish. That's okay. So it was just kind of a roundabout thing, but boy, it just did not sit well with me in any way, shape, or form. As we're getting toward the end of this, Rick Atherton says, well, you know what? We could bring this before the planning board. Yep. We could request this for the planning board, but they probably wouldn't even pay attention to this at all. And boy, and there was that little chuckle afterwards, and boy, did that catch me the wrong way. Because, can I finish what I'm trying to do? Thank you. But, yeah, you're not helping you're not helping me at the moment. The thing that bothers me is the tone was the planning board doesn't care. Okay? It is, and to me, that was highly problematic. I think this board is a very caring board. I think we try to take as many things into consideration, but thank God you guys, too, also look at it from the perspective of what we legally can and can't do. And that is a world worth of difference there. But to suggest in any way, shape, or form that this board doesn't care about things like affordable housing or how it affects the community, no, you don't get to get that glove and hit me across the face with it, because I will hit back. Well, so thank you for just letting me say that. It stuck so badly, and the tone of that meeting was so problematic about what needed to happen here. I think we do need to move ahead with this.
I mean,
thank you for listening.
In many ways, the conversation became much more about the optics than the science.
Yeah.
And we're wanting to bring this back to the science.
Yeah. They also want to run, a little group of the FinCom members want to run a little demographic report on their own. Now, we just had a census, but apparently they're not happy with or going to accept the demographics illustrated in the census. So they want to run their own little thing, and I forget what they called it, Andrew, but they want to run their own little thing to see what the demographics are, because they don't believe what came out legally that every other place in the country has to abide by at the moment. So I don't know what's happening over there at the FinCom, but something's going on.
Go ahead.
I think we shouldn't say too much about the other boards and what's going on publicly. That's okay. That's okay. Let them. We should just do what we're supposed to do. Right. And I think a good idea is to get this report done, and that's it. We don't care.
Yep.
In a sense, we don't really care what they think. We care what our duties are. And I think we should just go forward with that. Don't worry about going back and forth with them and all that. I don't think that's...
I agree.
Not a good
agree.
move. Not a good move.
So, Andrew, what would it be? I think it would be appropriate just for the board to make a motion to that effect and second it, and that way it at least puts some validity to it, with the understanding of that we want this to carry forward. You're going to very graciously pay to get that done.
So moved.
Yep. All right. So that motion is made and seconded. Is there a discussion on the issue?
That's a good idea.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Quickly.
One comment about this, just real quick. I know
Yeah, go ahead.
Patriots are on. I
Yeah.
want to go watch the game as much as anyone. But here's one thing, and we have newer people here.
I was recording it.
This, we were always, I guess I would say accused. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but sort of assumed that we weren't watching the infrastructure, Joe. We weren't getting enough.
No, I know what they're
And so we've been so focused on, they're going to do this septic, pump station. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And now we got to count kids. This is new. Like, this is not something we ever thought about even 6 months ago as far as these projects. So that's why this has taken on a whole new sort of...
we got to get the level of cooperation up, not, we don't want to get back and forth.
Right, but I'm just saying that, like, we've been concentrating on the real stuff, the stuff under the street, above the street, getting things from the applicants, and then all of a sudden this comes up, and it's a whole nother ballgame of discussion. So, anyway.
So,
that's all.
All right. And I think the things about the warrant articles and that will be for one of our meetings in the not too far future here. Although Andrew did send something out, so if you have any comments, let him know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and we're fixing Breezeway, right?
Ladies and gentlemen,
on the list.
January 9th is before us. Merry Christmas, Happy
Merry
New
Christmas.
Year,
Happy New Year.
whatever you celebrate beyond. Motion to adjourn. Thank you all. Truly, thank you all.
All right.
Really appreciate it.